Chapter 4962. Under the sound of such majestic anger, all the black robes stopped the movements in their hands for a moment. The passage of time seemed to slow down. Bienzin only felt that the speed of the blood flowing in the fairy body had frozen. The air dropped to freezing point, and everything was full of dead silence and cold. Then, the void quietly rippled at this moment. Immediately afterwards, thousands of white light soared in tent, like a blooming lotus platform, fully stretched. And in the center of this sword in tent, there are two figures standing. One man and one woman. The middle-aged man cleans his face without beard, is extraordinary heroic, and has long hair dancing in the wind. And the heroic aura exuded by that woman was enough to overwhelm her own beauty, and when her black gold dress perfectly set off her figure, it was extremely mysterious. They each carried 6 long swords on their waists, full of majesty that could not be seen directly. What flows around them is not the strength, but the pure sword intent. The whole shattered void seemed to be silent at this moment, and all the black robe envoys subconsciously looked at these two uninvited guests. A wisp of cold sweat flows from the far sideburns, and the horror of life and death that gushes out of his heart is caused by these two. Besieged by the black robe at the very center, Jian Wushuang, who was already at the end of the crossbow, and could destroy the immortal body at any time, finally showed a wry smile after looking at the two figures. Yan Fan first raised his eyebrows and smiled, then was completely angry. "You guys, dare to hurt my disciple? Is your life too long?" Feeling that the coldness around him has completely disappeared, and the black robe made him speak wildly with dissatisfaction, and directly urged himself to suppress the past. Jumping beam clown. Yan Fan sneered, looking at the black robe envoy who was about to rush. He didn't even bother to pull out the sword. At the next moment, a subtle sword intent emerged from the lotus platform under Yen Hu's feet, directly slashing forward. A shocking scene appeared. The black robe emissary who was running at extreme speed, the fairy body was instantly fragmented and miserably scattered in the void. Everything seemed like it had never happened before, extremely silent. "Good apprentice, leave it to your teacher next." Step out in one step, thousands of sword intents spread across the wild. Yan Fan laughed loudly and flew directly towards Jian Wushuang with Jiang Li. Bienzin shouted in disbelief, "Hurry up and stop them, and kill them all at this time, not leaving one." With the issuance of this order, more than 200 black-robed droves all frantically surrounded Jiang Lian and returned. Facing the terrifying power that came over the sky, these two true sword immortals all smiled quietly, as if they were contempt. In the next moment, the void was completely replaced by a diamond-shaped light curtain. The boundless sword curtain fell down. This sword curtain is a sword that can easily kill 100,000 dead immortals under the sea of blood, and it is a sword that Jian Wushuang has to deal with all his strength. As for the fate of these black robe envoys, when the two sword immortals appeared on the stage, they had already been completely determined. The sword curtain fell silently, and everything was a foregone conclusion. All the black robe envoys who were preparing to fight with all their strength only felt that their eyes suddenly lit up, and then their heads turned around. They are without exception. More than 200 black robe envoys died directly. The death was only in an instant, and even the bones of the immortal body were turned into residues, scattered in the void, and turned into stars. "Apprentice, it's not too late for the teachers." Yan Fan and Jiang Li descended directly in front of Jian Wushuang and said with a smile. Jian Wu was pale on both sides, and then he folded his hands and said, "Thank you two seniors for coming to help. The juniors are grateful." Yan Fan stretched out his hand and put down his palm, and said in a condensed voice, "You don't need to say thank you between you and me." Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly, "Actually, you don't have to come here to take risks." When Yan Fan heard it, he immediately slapped his chest and said, "If you are a master and can't even protect your disciple, it's better to die. What's more, the disciple is trapped by this group of salted fish. I am afraid that only these two sword immortals would dare to call hundreds of rank 3 Dian immortals salted fish awful." Jiang Li, who had rarely spoken for a long time, spoke at this moment, his domineering extreme. "Apprentice, who else wants to kill? Let us solve it together. so as not to leave troubles. Jian Wushuang did not speak, but subconsciously looked forward. There, far away from the edge of the sword curtain, when he saw Jian Wushuang, he cast his eyes, almost standing unstable, and fell into the void. Bian Ziyun was still in the horrible scene just now and never recovered. More than 200 Black Robe envoys, that is, more than 200 third-rank Dayan immortals, all died strangely. I am afraid that the 9th-rank Dayan immortal came. This is impossible. But at this moment, it all happened. All of them died in an instant, and all the secrets of the temple completely disappeared. He who has no support, his face pale. Hey, I even let go of a guy, so I'll solve it easily. Yen Fan said in a low voice, with his palm quietly placed on the hilt of his waist. Rank 6 Dayan immortal didn't seem to be worth his sword, but in order to make a quick battle, Yen Fan still drew out a snowflake longsword. The void suddenly dropped to the freezing point. Even after hundreds of feet away, Bian Ziyun still felt the blood clotting. He was extremely convinced that he couldn't stop this sword at all. So he made a decisive decision. Almost at the same time that Yen Fan drew his sword, he directly used both palms and fingers to tear open blood stains in front of his chest. Divine blood spurted directly from the blood marks on his chest, and then dripped into the void. The next moment, the originally dead and broken heaven and land plane suddenly surged, with all kinds of extremely powerful forces. Then, a body shaped like a streamer rose from the plane of heaven and land, and came to Bian Ziyun's side. In just a few dozen breaths of time, turned out to be a gathering of hundreds of Dayan immortals, and a steady stream of Dayan immortals flew up from the plane of heaven and land. They were all very thirsty and bloody, and their red eyes surrounded the far side. Bian Ziyun stepped back and pointed in Jian Wushuang's direction, and said grimly, "As long as you take down the 3 of them, the blood in my body, including the blood of the emperor, can be supplied to you. What are you waiting for? Let's go together." All the bloodthirsty Dayan immortals were completely crazy and rushed towards Jian Wushuang without any hesitation at this moment. Yen Fan smiled compassionately. All beings are equal under the sword in his hand. However, at this moment, Jian Wushuang, who was fully absorbed, only felt a fire in his chest. Then before he could react, a completely black bead, as if receiving some kind of induction, flew directly out of his arms and went straight to the void. That completely black bead, Jian Wushuang saw that it was exactly the black bead he found from the 6-day realm, the first one of the next 3 days, under the Black Abyss prison. Chapter 4963. Since this black bead was found by him, it has been lying peacefully in his arms, without any vision. Except that the 3 emperors Jining was very wary of him, this black bead no longer had a sense of existence. However, it was this black bead that had no sense of existence, but at this moment drilled out of Jian Wushuang's arms and flew into the void. Its speed is so fast that it even surpasses Yen Fan. What is this? Yen Fan was puzzled, and the palm of the sword's hilt also relaxed. But under this chaotic and broken sky, above the broken plane of heaven and land, no one Dayan would care about such a small black bead. The Dayan immortals who were bewitched by the blood flowing out of Bian Ziyun rushed towards Jian Wushuang from all directions. As the Tianlu plane fell into an irreversible split and fall, all the Dayan immortals trapped in the Tianlu regained their freedom at this moment. That kind of weird barrier that shrouded heaven and land disappeared, and nearly half of Dayan immortals, regardless of the horror of the borderless sea, flying or swimming, escaped from heaven and land. Nearly half of the Dayan immortal all rushed into the void at this moment, crazy. These Dayan immortals sinking into the endless sea were once the strongest in control of the battlefield, but after countless years, they have fallen and become bloodthirsty monsters. And almost at the same time, when Tianlu was cut into 2 pieces by Jian Wushuang, a giant beast suddenly emerged from the water in the not-so-distant borderless sea. He seemed to have just been awakened from a deep sleep, and 9 huge heads that looked like a big sun looked at the plane of heaven and land that was about to fall at the same time. Then the giant beast coveted, and after a brief thought, he plunged directly into the sea and headed towards the broken heaven and land. At this moment, hundreds of Dayan immortals rushed towards Jian Wushuang frantically. Jiang Liliu raised his eyebrows and directly stopped Jian Wushuang behind him, and then rushed to Yen back to say loudly, "What are you still doing in a daze? A quick decision." Yen Fan nodded, facing the overwhelming Dian Immortals, ready to cut a sword. Only Jian Wushuang stared at the black bead rotating in the void, and he felt that something terrible would happen next. As if to confirm his thoughts, the black beads that kept spinning in the void scattered hundreds of millions of gleams in the next moment. This kind of faint light showed a weird black and purple, like a wave, instantly spreading across the entire void. Almost at the moment when the black and purple light fell, Jian Wushuang felt a kind of tremor. Uncontrollable trembling. This tremor is like a real feeling of powerlessness, even beyond the powerless feeling of facing the emperor. Jian Wushuang felt that the strength in his body was trembling, and he was slightly dizzy in his mind. Jiang Lian returned to the two sword immortals with the same symptoms. Their expressions changed drastically and they looked directly at the spinning black bead. At this moment, all the crazy Dian immortals began to release all kinds of terrifying immortal styles, and the violent force spread. But the horrible scene appeared, almost the instant when the power spread out. It was disintegrated and swallowed by the hundreds of millions of ghost lights cast by the black beads. Hundreds of immortal styles enough to destroy any heaven, and Yanli were all disintegrated and shattered. Then the whole body was covered with Yanli's Dian immortal. The immortal body gushed out the blood at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in a short moment, it became a corpse directly. Nearly more than 300 Dian immortals. Only at this moment, the fairy source burst into pieces, and the immortal body turned into a corpse. The boundless black and purple light is still piercing through the earth, wherever it can be enveloped. Yanli is disintegrated and swallowed. Dian immortal is also drained from the source of the immortal and turned into a corpse. Jian Wushuang had turned pale. He seemed to have realized something, and turned back to Jiang Lian and said, "Don't release Yanli, nothing at all." Jiang Li nodded heavily. She and Yen Fan were not directly beheaded under this faint light, most likely because they did not release any power. Yen Fan's face was also a little pale. Even though he had seen too many tragic battles, it was the first time he had seen such a strange scene. What exactly was that black bead, and the faint light that radiated from it, was able to swallow all the approaching Dian immortal in an instant. At the same time, Yen Fan also had an inexplicable intuition. If he had just released Yanli instead of Jinni, he would probably end up not much better than those Dian immortals. Under the sky covered by hundreds of millions of looming rays of light, all the Dian immortals that released their power were directly sucked into corpses, without even a bit of fairy rhyme. Bian Ziyuan had already been shocked out of his body. Almost at the same time that all Dian immortals had died, he turned around and fled. However, he was still a step late in the end, and he subconsciously released his strength. Those dark and purple light rays are like Tarsus maggots, directly enclosing his entire fairy body. Ugh! He screamed in shock. The fairy body was wilting at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the fairy source was instantly shattered. Facing the shattered temple, Bian Ziyuan finally turned into a handful of flying ash and disappeared completely. This scene was completely captured by Jian Wushuang. He did not expect Bian Ziyuan to die in such a rush. It was an unexpected battle, but it ended directly after the appearance of this black bead. Jian Wushuang and Jiang Lian returned to the three, standing quietly in place under the shroud of this light. No one dared to do anything. That unknown Yugong possesses the power to harvest any Dian immortal. With the complete death of Dian immortal, hundreds of millions of Huameng came and went quickly, and immediately returned to the black beads. Then the black bead turned into a dark meteor, and got into Jian Wushuang's arms at an unimaginable speed. Jian Wu had cold hands and feet almost sat in the void. Since coming to Dianhuan, he has never had a moment of horror like this moment. The black bead with unknown power was really too terrifying. It would be easy to kill any Dian immortal's ability easily, and it would be easy to kill Jian Wushuang. And he finally knew why the true soul of the three emperors was so nervous at the beginning. Jian Wushuang now regrets it very much. This black bead is simply an extremely unstable factor. If he releases a bit of power fluctuation, will he be directly killed? Something ran past. Gang, Where's the black bead just now? Yen Fan looked up and looked around. Because the black bead disappeared so fast that neither of Jiang Lian returned to see where it had disappeared. But Jian Wushuang, who was carrying the black bead, wanted to cry without tears at this moment and didn't even dare to breathe. Chapter 4964. That kind of weird and inexplicable light disappeared, and Yen Fan dared to leave after another while. Madam, you know who made the move just now. I think in this borderless sea, there will be no more than one hand that can arouse the terrible power just now. Jiang Li shook his head. The two of us have been sleeping under the sea of blood for too long, and we don't know who else will enter here later. That's really weird. Fortunately, our husband and wife have always been cutting grass and roots, leaving no immortals under the sword, and there will not be any opponents who can't get through with us. Yen Fan scratched his head and said, and then heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Jian Wushuang also safe and sound. The apprentice is fine, otherwise he will die. Jiang Libai glanced at him. Idiot, if you made a quick decision just now, why did you cause so much trouble? You will get rid of your verbose problems in the future. I'm not long-winded, it's a good way to attack the heart. The best way to kill the enemy is to attack the heart. Yen Fan talked freely. Seeing them bickering, Jian Wushuang also slowly recovered from the shock, and then stretched his hand into his arms as if he was dead. When the finger touched the black bead, there was no horrible suction power as imagined, only a warm and cool meaning, as if it had never recovered. It's really strange, how did this black bead get awakened? Jian Wushuang thought. But soon, Yen Fan interrupted his thoughts. Apprentice, what are you going to do next? I want to hear your thoughts as a teacher. Withdrawing his thoughts, facing Yen Fan's verbal advantage, Jian Wushuang just smiled bitterly in his heart, but did not stop it. I came here to find a friend, and then I will continue to look for it. When Yen Fan heard this, he continued to smile. Then we will protect you on the next journey. Jiang Li also nodded. With us by your side, this endless sea will never threaten you anymore. It's not so good. Jian Wushuang scratched his head. Somehow he didn't know how to refuse. It's natural and righteous for the master to protect the apprentice. If it's good or not, you can come over. Yen Fan laughed, and took Jian Wushuang directly and flew forward. Jiang Li also raised his eyebrows and smiled, seemingly satisfied with his husband's domineering, and then followed him. From this, we can see a magical scene. Two sword celestial beings crossed the borderless sea, with a shivering little Yenxian in between. Almost at the same time they left the heaven and land plane, they slowly walked out of the shattered temple. This figure is exactly the young man who was previously beheaded by Jian Wushuang with a single sword. He walked slowly in the heaven and land plane that had been in ruins. His face was without sadness or joy, as if everything here was not his. In the end, he walked in the center position after the war, and then his arms snapped. Suddenly, a unique energy fluctuation of several points began to gather in the void. As this energy fluctuation kept gathering, the originally broken void began to change. One after another, huameng, which looked like broken stars, began to appear, and then quickly intertwined and connected. With the intertwining of these stars and brilliance, a fairy source shattered, and the figure that could not die again appeared again. That is, far away. Thousands of flowing clouds and water patterns flowed slowly, covering the edges of his body. Suddenly opened his eyes at this moment. The unspeakable general situation filled the void, and thunder snakes shuttled through the clouds. In the end, when his figure was completely condensed, the young man retracted his arms. His face was so pale that there was no blood. The boundless trend finally dissipated, and the distant figure fell heavily on the ground. Mist, I want your life. At the same time he landed, he punched the surrounding plains into deep pits. The young man walked slowly in front of him, then squatted down. He can't die now. Whether we can leave here or not depends on him. Jian Wushuang, who left the broken heaven and land plane and crossed the sea of no edge, felt that everything seemed to be a dream. The treacherous heaven and land plane and the terrifying river of blood have all become past tense. Today, he left unharmed, and there are two cheap masters. Jian Wushuang learned from the previous brief words that Jiang Lian's return to these two sword companions was likely to reach the terrifying height of the sword immortal before Zhen Wuang had become emperor. Judging from their control of the sword intent and their inadvertent power, I am afraid that the realm is at least the 9-rank Dian immortal. With these two terrifying evil spirits guarding him, Jian Wushuang would really be able to walk sideways in this sea of boundlessness if he hadn't met the real emperor. Moreover, he hasn't forgotten that in the ring in his hand, there is still an emperor with intact emperor body. In the fast crossing, Yen returned to the front. "Disciple, where do you know the old friend you are looking for?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. "I don't know. I don't have any clues either." Behind him, Jiang Li frowned slightly and then said, "I'm afraid it will be a little troublesome. The reason why this sea without edges is called the sea without edges is because it has no boundaries. And once you have crossed the sea for too long, you will get lost in it. If your friend doesn't have the strength of rank 6 or higher, I'm afraid he will already be lost." Jian Wushuang was already a little worried when he heard this. Although Di Qing was the 9th-rank Dian immortal, he was actually at the end of the battle after that battle. Even if he was exiled, the immortal body was far from recovering. But Di Qing still has 7 true lives. You reading www.Akanshu. Even if calm falls in this borderless sea, it will not die directly. Immediately afterwards, Yen Fan said again, "Disciple, I can ask, how long has your old friend been exiled so far? If it is less than a year, there may still be a possibility of finding it." Jian Wushuang said, "In less than a year." What? Only 1 year? Yen Fan and Jiang Li were a little shocked at the same time. For Yangxian's long and endless life, 1 year is not even enough to breathe. "Yes, it's not more than a year," he confirmed again. Yen Fan seemed to be thinking about something and finally said, "If it's less than a year, it's really possible to find it." "You mean, go to that place?" Jiang Li frowned slightly. He nodded. "In this situation, I can only go there to try my luck." Chapter 4965. Jian Wushuang heard some clues and asked, "That place is dangerous?" "Disciple, no matter how dangerous this endless sea is, as long as we are by your side, no one can help you." Yen Fan patted him on the shoulder. "It's just that the place is not dangerous, but rather strange." Jiang Li smiled coldly at this time, and a pair of Ingmu almost killed Yen Hui to pieces. "It's weird. I'm afraid it's an unforgettable old relationship." Yen Fan twitched at the corner of his mouth, and then said awe-inspiringly, "Madam, what are you talking about? Don't mention the old things. I've already broken up with the past." Jiang Li snorted coldly, and the 6-handed long sword slung around his waist screamed, "It doesn't matter if you can't forget it. I will cut it off for you with 1 sword and 1 sword. Disciple, go quickly, it shouldn't be too late." Yen Fan left these words and flew out first. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. It seems that this cheap master still carries a lot of old love debts. In any case, his originally hanging heart also settled down a bit. Finding with a goal is far better than looking aimlessly. The sea of boundlessness is endless, boundless, and it is difficult for everything to float above it. Only the bones of Yanxian can float on it. And the previous mighty heaven and land plane was completely composed of Yanxian bones. As he continued to move forward, various planes of different sizes appeared in Jian Wushuang's eyes. There is not much difference between a seeding area and the universe of Wuyanzi overseas. Here is simply a small universe. And as they move forward, there are various vicious and unopened Dian immortals who want to kill them. Regrettably, if Jian Wushuang were alone, he would naturally retreat. After all, rank 6 Dian immortal could already make him drink a pot. But now there are 2 sword immortals escorting them. Even if it is rank 6 Dian immortal, Yen Fan, who is walking in the forefront, does not bother to draw a sword. He can even shred any rank 6 Dian immortal with just 1 finger and his unmatched sword intent. So there are already dozens of tier 6 Dian immortals who have traveled for hundreds of millions of miles, and the number of tier 6 Dian immortals who have died under Yan's hands is nearly 100. On the one hand, Jian Wushuang had a bit of unfathomable strength in the frightened Yan's return, On the other hand, he was frightened by how many Dayan immortals had been banished by Zhen Wuyang Emperor. It's no wonder that there are so few Dayanxians in the Desiu nowadays, and the co-authors have been banished into the Sea of Endless years ago. So far, the lowest level in this borderless sea is Dayan Immortal. Jian Wushuang guessed that countless immortals were exiled here. But Yen Xian's fate may not be too good. As we continue to move forward, the plane of the endless sea gradually disappears, and is replaced by endless cold and dead silence. Jian Wushuang felt Daiking's breath as much as possible, hoping to find it as soon as possible. And a pair of old gods in Yanfan gradually became a little dignified as they continued to move forward. A pair of heroic eyes began to look around. The tree? How could a tree grow in this sea of no edge? Seeing the extremely weird scene in front of him, Jian Wushuang was a little surprised. Because in front of him, trees almost as high as the sky appeared on the originally endless Black Sea. The trees are tall, with only stretched branches and no leaves. They do not look like some kind of fairy tree. In Jian Wushuang's fascination, everything in his body changed, and Jiang Li and Yen Fan had quietly disappeared at this moment. Well, another illusion? Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and he almost immediately realized that he was already in an illusion. Is it because I saw those trees? Being able to make him fall into the illusion in this short moment, the fairy cultivator who laid this illusion did have some skills. But it encountered Jian Wushuang who could see through it at a glance. Immediately afterwards, just as he was about to use the invisible sword to cut open the illusion in front of him, a snowflake-long sword took him one step ahead and directly opened a crack in the illusion. Then a big palm pulled Jian Wushuang out of the illusion. Good fellow, you dare to cast the illusion in front of this seat? I think you are impatient to live. Yen Fan was full of anger, and when he was about to do it, Jiang Li took a step ahead of him and directly stretched out his hand and shook it. In an instant, the entire illusion was shattered, and then a huge ball of hair was pinched by Jiang Li. That is a huge rabbit. Jiang Li's expression was fierce, and he was about to chop off the rabbit's head with his palm up. Madam, keep your hand. Yen Fan yelled, and rushed forward with a stride, snatching the rabbit from Jiang Li's men. What are you doing, want to die? Jiang Li was full of anger. Yen Fan's mouth twitched, and he held the big rabbit with a smile. Here, this rabbit can't be killed, it's a friend of the old man. At this time, the big rabbit suddenly broke free from his embrace, and turned into a very agile girl in the void. Ha! The smart girl gave a feint, then turned around and ran, and soon disappeared. This dead girl. Yen Fan muttered to himself, then smiled again. Can't kill, can't kill. Jiang Li put on an expression that the old lady was too lazy to care about you, and took Jian Wushuang to leave. However, at this moment, a vague and extremely agile voice, like falling from the 9 heavens, was indescribably beautiful. Since it's all here, why don't you come and sit with me? How about recounting your old feelings? Yen Fan's complexion changed in an instant, and her lips became a little pale. Madam, hurry up. After Jiang Li heard the mellow and charming voice, his eyes almost exploded with anger, and after glaring at Yen Fan with an expression that he couldn't wait to swallow it alive, he rushed directly into the clouds of 9 heavens. My old lady didn't bother you. You dare to find my old lady. Today I will break your Guiyue immortal palace. This is the first time Jian Wushuang has seen Jiang Li draw a sword, her whole figure with endless sword intent, breaking through the sky and going straight for 9 days. Yen Fan was pale and shouted, Madam, it's getting smaller, the structure is getting smaller. Boom! 100,000 sword intent fell from the sky, almost turning him into a piece of meat. Jian Wushuang's heart was frightened, and he never expected that the 2 swordsmen had a temper, and they were actually real swords and real swords. After avoiding the 100,000 sword intent, Yen Fan looked at Jian Wushuang nervously. Quickly, she is going crazy. The 2 of us quickly stop it, otherwise we will really be upset next. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to make Jiang Li so embarrassed. I'm afraid that the owner of the voice just now has an inexplicable relationship with Yen Fan. It's a love debt again. Chapter 4966. The illusion was directly torn to pieces by Jiang Li, who was so angry, and Jian Wushuang was able to see the true whole picture of the sea of boundlessness ahead. I saw a giant tree that could no longer be called a tree, rooted at the bottom of the sea and bordering the sky, with an indescribable canopy, almost vast than a celestial plane. A strange fragrance also penetrated into the nasal cavity. This is a fairy laurel tree larger than a heavenly plane. In Jian Wushuang's memory, the world tree in Xiaodaijian's Degushan was not as grand as the fairy laurel tree right now. He saw it really. On the crown of the fairy laurel tree, there was an ancient fairy hall hidden in the clouds. Jiang Li, who was raging into the sky, directly hit the fairy palace in the broken illusion. Yen returned to the soul without possessing the body, but also hurriedly chased up. This ancient fairy hall lasted almost 9 days, lonely to the extreme. Jian Wushuang immediately stepped onto the fairy hall. On the vast fairy palace square, there are huge laurel trees growing. And on each fairy laurel tree, there is a quietly hanging round, emitting a hazy moon. Roughly counting, there will never be thousands of moons. The entire ancient fairy hall is shrouded in the brilliance of the moon, which is indescribable. At this moment, Jiang Li, who was raging into the sky, walked forward holding a true sword with a long and narrow blade. The square seemed to be rumbling as she stepped on it. The next moment, the originally closed palace door suddenly opened, and dozens of white clothes flew directly from the inside. Each of these white clothes is at the lowest level of rank 3, and they are listed in the front of the square one by one, and they look forward as if they are facing an enemy. Jiang Li didn't even look at them and walked straight ahead. The one standing in the front with an old face and white clothes hurriedly shouted, "Stay aside, no one can go to the fairy palace without my fairy monarch's word. Get away if you don't want to die." Jiang Li whispered angrily. His violent sword intent was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Lao Chengbai was taken aback when he heard the words. Obviously he did not expect the heroic woman in front of him to be so domineering. Seeing the terrifying aura on her body at another glance, Lao Chengbai gritted his teeth and stepped back and shouted in a low voice, "Forming!" As his voice fell, dozens of white clothes all released their first blow at this moment. Their powers are connected to each other, forming an indescribable and magnificent ancient moon fairy formation. At this moment, the boundless strength of the power is fully displayed, and the vast ancient moon in the immortal array shoots out infinite strands of magnificence. The endless lunar blooming power surging out from every white-clothed body, purely and incomparably provide the fairy formation. This is an immortal formation that has assembled more than 10 rank 3 Dian immortals with all their strength. Even a rank 6 Dian immortal dare not look down upon it. But the most wrong thing is that they use the wrong object. An enemy of not only rank 9 Dian immortal, but also sword immortal, can easily let them know what a miserable end is. If the girl is going further, don't blame us for being impolite. The old-faced Dian immortal said in a deep voice. He seemed to be so confident in the power of the ancient moon fairy formation that he spoke to remind Jiang Li. However, Jiang Li's expression was deep and cold, and he directly raised his sword and cut forward. A sword intent that is as prosperous as the sea slashed straight up. The sapphire square was plowed by this sword intent to plow a trail that was as wide as 1,000 feet, and the floor tiles were broken into dust. Seeing this shocking scene, all the white clothes took a breath of air, and then desperately input power for the fairy formation. However, the next moment, the sword intent that shook the sky and the earth directly cut away the Guyuesian formation. It was too easy and freehand. It was as easy as tearing open a piece of white paper, combined with the full strength of the 15 3-turn Dian immortals, and even failed to save a breath of time. The sword intent smashed the dead, just broke the fairy formation, did not hurt a white robe, but shook them all out. The ultimate goal of this sword intent is that ancient fairy palace. At this moment, a black-haired white robe quietly walked out of the fairy hall, holding a real sword, his heroism and freedom to the extreme. Facing the real sword that came from the sky, the black cloth and white hair pulled out the real sword from its sheath and brazenly confronted it. Countless sword intents swept from behind him, shocking the world. The two collided and the whole broken square shook. Jian Wushuang also opened his eyes at this moment. Another sword fairy? In the entire vast and infinite sea domain, even Dian Immortal is an index, and Sword Immortal is just a legend. But in this boundless sea, Jian Wushuang saw 3 Dian Immortals one after another, and he was already shocked to the point where he couldn't speak. The difficulty of becoming a Sword Immortal is even beyond the concept of cultivation. You know, if you want to become a sword fairy, there is no mature system. Every swordsman can only explore slowly and then create his own sword. But nearly 9 out of 10 swordsmen died on the way to create their own swordsmanship. Only the remaining swordsmen, who are far less than 10%, are qualified to yearn for the path of the sword fairy. There is no concept of cultivation as a result of practicing the sword. Yen Fan is an example. In order to become a sword fairy, he once wielded his sword for a Chinese year. A long year is enough to allow a monk who is in the beginning to climb into the realm of eternal fairy. But in this Chinese New Year, Yen Fan was only used to wield the sword, and the difficulty of becoming a sword fairy is evident from this. Blocking the sword intent with the sword intent, when the two were completely offset, the black-haired and white-clothed stood on the broken square again, retreating half a step without a trace on his right foot. It was this subtle scene that was caught by Jian Wushuang, and then he directly determined that this black-haired white robe was definitely not a sword fairy. A half-step retreat means that in the previous confrontation, there is not enough power. And a true sword immortal would never retreat half a step under that sword intent. But even though he is not the sword immortal, he is definitely only 1 line away from the sword immortal, infinitely close to the sword immortal. The world is silent, there is no more fight. WBB. Novel. Calm, the real sword is in its sheath, and the iceberg-like face of black hair and white clothes slowly bursts into a smile. However, Jiang Li, who was originally full of anger, changed his face slightly at this moment, and his eyes were a little dodging. Good fellow, why is this old thing here? Yen Fan, who had a lively look on his face, was shocked, and hurriedly walked to Jiang Li, blocking the sight of the two. Ahem, I said that, it is not suitable to stay here for a long time, we should go. Yen Fan said with a taboo face. Jiang Li glared at him. Going? Yes, I will level the fairy palace first. After she finished speaking, she slapped Yen Fan and flew out, and walked forward. Long time no see. At this moment, the black hair and white clothes spoke, and the joy of reunion after a long time, and a trace of vicissitudes were hidden in the words. Jiang Li's complexion was a little more unnatural, but he quickly returned to normal. Chapter 4967. Then she said, Why are you in this place? The black-haired and white-clothed said again, It's been too long, I don't want to sleep any longer, so I got here as a company with my old friend. Jiang Li sneered, It's really leisurely and elegant. How's your life? The black-haired white robe asked immediately. Not so good, get out of the way, my old lady is going to level this broken place. Jiang Li said in a deep voice, returning to his previous coldness. Yen Fan also hurried over at this time, first coughing deliberately and then whispering, Madam will not get angry, let's go. The black hair and white clothes laughed, looked at him and said, Brother Yen, since we are all here, let's come in and sit down. We haven't talked together for many years. Yen Fan hurriedly rebuffed, That's not necessary. Let's go back to sleep and we won't disturb your good things. After he finished speaking, he was about to take Jiang Li away. At this time, the fluttering and extremely charming voice came from the fairy palace, Leaving in such a hurry, you haven't done anything wrong with your heart, so why don't you even dare to sit here? Jiang Li instantly glanced at Yen Fan, who was about to flee. Yen Fan was shocked all over, then slowly turned around, righteously said, I haven't done anything wrong, but today I happen to be tired, so I won't come to bother. Jiang Li didn't bother to listen to his nonsense anymore, and directly took him into the fairy palace with strides. Yen Hu's face was ashes, and shouted at Jian Wushuang, The disciples come and save me. Helpless, Jian Wushuang shook his head slightly, and walked into the fairy palace together. The fairy palace is vast, the clouds are vast, and a faint fragrance rushes out, giving people a sense of indescribable comfort. And under the scent of this delicate fragrance, the force in the meridians is recovering at an extremely slow speed. Walking in the back, Jian Wushuang roughly took everything in this fairy palace into his eyes. The fairy palace is simple and elegant, and everything built by Wen Yu has little decoration but does not appear empty. Small stars and round moons the size of a palm are dotted in every space, making the whole fairy palace look like a flowing galaxy, extremely magnificent. Under the black hair and white clothes, Jiang Li angrily walked forward. At this moment, a whisper came into Jian Wushuang's ear from behind. It's really strange that there is actually a little Xiao Yangxian who is also here. Should we blast him out? Why don't you see them? Is the relationship with us Xianjun very unusual? Shut up to me, don't you think the things just now are not embarrassing enough? Don't blame me if anyone is talking. After being reprimanded by the old-fashioned white clothes, the gray-headed guys who were cut with a sword by Jiang Li stayed aside honestly, not daring to say anything. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and didn't take their words to heart at all. In this sea of boundlessness, his own strength could prove something more than what he said. As they entered, in the depths of this fairy palace, clouds began to float. Accompanied by this ethereal cloud and mist, there was an extremely gorgeous woman. Different from Jiang Li's domineering and heroic spirit, this extremely gorgeous woman has gentle brows and indescribably gentle and charming. Even Jian Wushuang rarely sees such a gorgeous and gentle woman. Just like a full moon, it means haziness. And holding a long-haired bunny in her arms adds a touch of softness and charm. Seeing this scene, Yan Fan's expression was extremely unnatural, but she still forced a smile. Then, all the white clothes in this fairy palace bowed their hands and said, I have seen Guangyue Xianjun. The gorgeous woman known as Guangyue Xianjun smiled slightly, and she reached out her hand to phantom thousands of clouds to hold them all up. Then her gaze slowly swept over, and finally her gaze fell on Jiang Li and Yan Fan. Farewell last time, long time no see. Jiang Li didn't follow her practice. He stepped forward and said coldly, Why are we blocking our way? If you don't explain it today, don't blame me for flattening your broken palace. Facing her threat, Xianjun Guangyue couldn't help but chuckle. Sister Jiang Li, you are still as irritable as before. Crack. Jiang Li's hand holding the hilt of the sword at his waist suddenly squeezed, as if it was possible to hold the hilt out of water at any time. Madam, calm down your anger. Yan Fan said in a low voice, trembling slightly. Guangyue Xianjun smiled again. However, in my opinion, you are the only one who can hold Brother Yan's heart. Hearing this, Jiang Li's expression eased slightly, and his palm loosened the hilt. At this time, Yan Fan hurriedly said, Well, this is a misunderstanding. Now that the misunderstanding is solved, we won't stay here too much. What's the rush? Haven't seen you for so long, don't you want to sit down and reminisce about the old? Jiang Li looked at him with a sneer, Sit down for me. Then, despite Yan Fan's whole body resisting, Jiang Li still sat down in front of the case. Jian Wushuang also took his seat, and was forcibly placed in the middle of the two by Jiang Li. The heroic middle-aged man with black hair and white clothes sat down next to Jiang Li. When they were all seated, Guangyue Xianjun also sat down, his eyes filled with joy that could not be concealed. The last time we left, we were still obscure monks, and now we are goodbye. After a few years, we have all become duplicity. Xianjun Guangyue was full of emotion. Although his face was extremely calm, his face was already quietly blushing. She let go of the little rabbit in her arms and patted her palms lightly, and then the next 2 columns of fairies, holding delicate silver pots, walked up on the clouds and mist, and then laid them down one by one. This is the lunar dew I survived after we separated. Now it's finally time for us to get together again. Jian Wushuang stared at it, and the silver jug poured out a cup of fermented rice, and suddenly a strong fragrance was released. Even if he was a bad drinker, he couldn't help swallowing his throat. There is no other reason, it is because this moon dew is too mellow. But after Yan Fan saw the moon dew in front of him, Her saliva almost squirted out of control. Then he ignored Jiang Li's frustrated gaze and directly took a long drink from the glass. "Let's drink together, you know the moon dew of Guangyue brood," the black-haired white said with a smile, and poured a glass for Jiang Li. Jiang Li snorted coldly. Instead of touching the wineglass, he just picked up the wine jug with his mouth to the spout, and the cow drank boldly. The wine line was scented in the air. Looking at such a bold Jiang Li, Jian Wushuang and the black-haired white clothes were a little bit dumbfounded, and immediately picked up the wineglass and took a sip. Chapter 4968. The moon dew enters the throat and turns into the sweetest wine line, which penetrates the internal organs, making it indescribable and comfortable. But at the same time, this fine wine called Yuelu was extremely vigorous, and Jian Wushuang felt that the fairy body became hot after a cup. Putting down the wineglass, Jian Wushuang looked at the black-haired and white clothes, and found that he was already watching him. His eyes were facing each other, and the black-haired white robes smiled friendly at him. Jian Wushuang replied, and then continued to look straight. "Good guy, it's really exciting." Yan Fan seemed unsatisfied, and simply put down the wineglass and learned how to drink like Jiang Li. Not to be outdone, the black hair and white clothes also picked up a hip flask and started drinking. Ling Jian Wushuang was a little surprised that the soft and charming Guangyue Xianjun also changed his previous weakness, lifted the hip flask, and started groaning. In this way, the original tense situation turned into fighting each other. Out of curiosity, Jian Wushuang tried the weight of the jug and couldn't help but slap his tongue. There are thousands of hidden inside this jug. Looking at the exquisite wine stored in it, no less than 100,000 caddies. If all these 100,000 caddies are lost, I am afraid Dianxian will be completely drunk. As time passed by, Jiang Li threw down the jug first, but it was empty, without a drop of fermented rice. "It's so happy!" Jiang Li's expression was not drunk at all, and satisfactorily retracted his feet on the case, and then sat back where he was. After a while, Yan Fan, black hair and white clothes, and Guangyue Xianjun all finished drinking the wine in the pot in turn, and their faces were more or less a little drunk. "How are you doing these years?" The black-haired and white-clothed looked at Jiang Li, and finally made up his mind to ask. "Being exiled here, who can be happy? Yan Fan and I have been in a deep sleep, and we rarely wake up until today." Jiang Li said slowly. The black hair and white clothes were silent, but soon he looked at Jian Wushuang again and asked, "Then this one?" Without waiting for Jiang to leave the mouth, Yan Hui immediately said excitedly, "This is the disciple of the Sword Immortal, and he is an inexhaustible stunner." As soon as these words came out, Guangyue Xianjun's beautiful eyes turned towards Jian Wushuang. She is very clear about Yan Fan's pride. As Wanggu era, she used a sword to suppress the strong existence of Wanzhou Tianyu. Even the emperor wanted to draw him into his command. At that time, many Jinghong Tianjiao wanted to be his disciple, but he had never accepted one. Now that the years have passed, and when we meet again, there is an additional apprentice beside Yan Fan, how can she not be surprised? Hearing this, the black-haired and white-clothed could not help but smile. "Oh, it seems that Brother Yan has a good vision. He is indeed a good seedling, but it is too much to say that it is Jinghong Tianjiao. How can Jinghong Tianjiao be a trivial one? The realm of eternal fairy?" The fairy palace fell silent for a while. Jiang Li also looked upset at this moment. "Songting, what do you mean?" "It's not interesting, I'm just correcting some problems," the black-haired white said with a faint smile. And Yan Fan, who was originally excited, also changed his expression, watching him say meaningfully, "Listening to what you said, it seems that you have received a disciple who is really shocking Hong Tianjiao?" The black-haired and white-robed man named Song Ting said quietly, "Almost, he has understood his own kendo, and he will come to the Sword Immortal in the future." Yan Fan couldn't help but chuckle. "You guy, still like to joke like you did in the past. Your apprentice goes to the Sword Fairy? Don't be kidding, only my apprentice can go to the Sword Fairy." The fairy palace was silent. Song Ting looked at him and continued to whisper, "Competition? Come on, whoever is afraid of who?" Yan Fan said with disdain, "Hurry up and let your apprentice come out, we are in a hurry." As his voice fell, a black dress walked out from the depths of the fairy palace. In this fairy palace, all dressed in white, it seemed extremely out of place. The black-clothed youth's gaze and complexion were all extremely calm, like a real sword with a completely hidden edge, which made people absolutely unable to see through. And with his appearance, that calm gaze also locked Jian Wushuang for an instant. Turn 3 Dian Immortal. When Jiang Lian returned to both, he also knew why Chang Ting was so confident. His apprentice had already reached the level of the third revolution. Rank 3 is already a qualitative change, not to mention that he has realized his own swordsmanship. Even facing rank 6 Dian Immortal, he has enough power to fight. It's really tricky. Yan Fan murmured in a low voice, then quickly approached Jian Wushuang, and then lowered his voice. Good apprentice, my face is all on you this time, it's all up to you. I'm afraid this is not so good, I don't want to do it too much. Jian Wushuang said with a wry smile. Good apprentice, we must save me and hit this old man in the face fiercely. Yan Fan said in a low voice, almost kneeling before Jian Wushuang. Finally, Jian Wushuang nodded and said, Then I will give it a try. Yan Fan immediately burst into flames and almost jumped onto the table. My disciple has already agreed, so I'm ready to start. Song Ting was startled when he heard the words. He did not think that Yan Fan did not flinch, but challenged. Are you crazy? See clearly that my disciple is the third rank Dian Immortal. Just being oppressed by the force of growth is enough to make your disciple stand upright. Yan Fan snorted. Stop talking nonsense. This sword immortal will let you take a look today. What is the real shocking talent? Jian Wushuang slowly got up. Jiang Li on the side grabbed him and said in a low voice, Don't try hard. Stop in time if you feel uncomfortable. Don't worry, it's okay. He smiled slightly and stood in the center of the fairy palace. After seeing this scene, Xianjun Guangyue, who had originally planned to prevent it, had to give up, and at the same time she was sweating for Yan Fan. Yan Xian dealt with the first 3 rounds of Dian Xian, which has been the result of no suspense since ancient times, and there has never been any act of Yan Xian to counterkill. Even the most shocking Tianjiao is impossible. Could it be that all the previously fixed thinking will be subverted today? Song Ting gritted his teeth secretly. This extremely unequal battle, even if his apprentice won, it would never be too glorious. After all, the gap between Yan Xian and Dian Xian cannot be made up at all. With eyes facing each other, the black-clothed youth who looked like a hidden front was waiting to start, suddenly said, You are very powerful. You are different from all the swordsmen I have seen. Your sword intent is too pure, as if you have experienced the temper of blood and fire. Hearing these words, Jian Wushuang's original calm state of mind could not help but ripples. In this very short period of time, he could guess the characteristics that Jian Wushuang wanted to hide. He was definitely a terrifying existence. Chapter 4969. Wushuang Kendo, born out of the supernatural universe. It is the ultimate kendo inspired by the old man who guards the tomb of the gods in the depths of the universe. From now on, it was Jian Wushuang's strongest sword. When the whole kendo is fully integrated, he will instantly become a sword fairy. And all the sword intent of Jian Wushuang basically comes from Wushuang Kendo. Wushuang Kendo has indeed undergone the tempering of blood and fire before it can grow to this day. All of these were guessed by the black-clothed youth at this moment, and Jian Wushuang had to be shocked and wary. After speaking those words, the black-clothed youth directly squeezed the hilt of the sword at his waist. The aura of the whole figure was completely restrained. He said in a deep voice, So, next I will go all out. Don't think that I will lower my strength to fight you, including the Yanli realm, and I will not lower it a bit. Jian Wushuang nodded and said quietly, Of course I can, and I won't hide my strength. The black-clothed youth said, That's it? As the last word fell, thousands of sword intent suddenly emerged from his feet. The sword intent is like a changhong, running through the heavens and the earth, making the entire fairy palace in shock. Immediately afterwards, the Guangyue Xianjun sitting on the jade seat waved and lowered the endless moonflower, which directly turned into a barrier, enclosing the two. With this enchantment as the center, a martial arts field was formed, allowing them to let go of their hands and feet in this battle without destroying the fairy palace. Song Ting, who was black and white, couldn't help expressing satisfaction when seeing this scene. The disciple under his seat was really amazing, only the sword intent released from him formed a force of overwhelming pressure, almost immediately controlling the entire aura. In the competition between swordsmen, the first moment of the sword is extremely important. The so-called starting point, in a way, can already establish the battle. Song Ting immediately looked at Yen Fan again, and saw that instead of worrying about him, he looked at this scene with a smile, and couldn't help feeling angry. This battle, even if it was won, was extremely disgraceful. Thinking of this, Song Ting couldn't help but sneered. Knowing that you are defeated, you want to fight, you master really does not care about the life and death of your apprentice. If my apprentice starts harder, I'm afraid I won't have to tell the winner. Yen Fan's face instantly became cold when he heard the words, but then returned to normal. It's a wishful thinking to use your disciple, your inexperienced kendo, to hit my disciple hard. Oh, are you so confident? Song Ting said playfully. When did this sword immortal not be confident? Yen Fan said, stepping directly on the case, proudly speaking out a shocking word. If my apprentice doesn't beat your apprentices today, then your apprentice will be considered clean today. Crudeness means being too crude. The fairy palace was dead, and all the white clothes were twitching at the corners of their mouths, including the Guangyu Xianjun sitting on the jade seat. Yen Fan, you are presumptuous. Song Ting smashed the case made by Xian Guishu with a hard shot, and straightened up, his face sinking like water. This is a naked humiliation. If it were not in the fairy palace, he would have already taken the sword. Yen Fan said with her lips, I'm not presumptuous. Why, can't you tell the truth now? You are so confident that your apprentice will win? Why, I don't believe that my disciple wins. Do you believe that your disciple wins? Then how about some more conditions? Song Ting tried his best to suppress his anger. What conditions? Yen Fan said, raising his eyebrows. Song Ting said coldly, if my disciple wins, your kendo belongs to me. If your disciple wins, my kendo belongs to you. How about? Without waiting for Yen Hui to speak, Guangyu Xianjun, who was sitting on the top of the jade seat, had a solemn expression and repeatedly stopped him. No, this condition is absolutely not allowed. I think this condition is not bad, but I have to add something to this condition. Yen Fan smiled quietly. If my disciple wins, then tell your disciple the secret of how to reach Dian Fairyland. Song Ting was startled, his expression slightly unnatural, but in the end he agreed. Once this condition is settled, it can't be changed. It is no use for Guangyu Xianjun to be worried and angry. And the reason why she was worried and angry was completely because these two rivals actually gambled out their own swords for this competition between apprentices. This is really fatal. You know, after reaching the point of sword immortal or even quasi-sword immortal, the competition between them is a matter of life and death. Often just one start is enough to determine life and death. As the original swordsmanship of the sword immortal, once it is fully known by evenly matched opponents, there is only one dead end. These two seemingly unremarkable conditions are the fate of a sword fairy and a quasi-sword fairy. This is what makes Guangyu Xianjun nervous and dignified. And she has also made a decision in her heart. No matter what the final result, she will not let the two show the sword. Jian Wushuang and the young man in black, who were completely enveloped by Yue Hua, did not hear any conversation from outside. In their eyes and ears, there is only each other. At this moment, the breath revealed by the black-clothed youth was completely different from the one previously released, vigorous and vigorous. This made Jian Wushuang as if he was not facing a swordsman, but a sword, an épée without a blade and a sheath. Next, let him be more certain of his thoughts. The young man in black drew a sword from behind, a dark épée. It can't be described with a sword anymore. It can be described with a heavy ruler or even an iron plate. Without a sword edge, it was like a heavy ruler. Jian Wushuang had solemn eyes, and everyone who could use this épée sword was a swordsman who had tempered his sword to the pinnacle. The épée has no edge and the skill is not working. Without the sword's edge, it has more lethality. Jian Wushuang can even be sure that Chang Yanxian can't even take this sword. At this moment, the young man in black seemed to be completely integrated with the épée in his hand, and his eyes became completely black. The greatest respect for you is to let you kneel under my sword. Jian Wushuang shrugged, and an invisible sword condensed in his right hand at this moment. This is the visualization of Wushuang Kendo, with sword patterns slowly circulating. Song Ting, who had been watching this scene from afar, looked a little dignified. No sword is invisible, this kid is not easy. But Yan Fan was so proud, his chin was almost up to the sky. He once had a brief discussion of swords with Jian Wushuang. Although there were only 2 swords, he truly felt the aura of real swordsmanship. I may be able to beat you, an old thing, my disciple, let alone your disciple who is not as good as you. Chapter 4970. Yan Fan secretly proudly said in his heart that in his current cognitive considerations, Jian Wushuang and Songting were already side by side. Under Jian Xian he has no rivals. In the Yuehua barrier, the black-clothed youth was the first to leave at this moment. He held the heavy sword high in both hands, and his whole figure was like a gloomy light, crushing towards Jian Wushuang. Zheng! Struggle! Jian Wushuang confronted him brazenly, and the invisible sword in his hand directly blocked his heavy sword. As soon as the sword came out, the black-clothed youth fully used every inch of the meridian in the fairy body, twisted the huge and incomparable heavy sword in his hand, and smashed it again. Sparks overflowing. Endless sword intent swept out, swallowing Jian Wushuang from all directions. At this moment, the black-clothed young man seemed to be tempering a sword embryo. A sword heavier than a sword hit Jian Wushuang's invisible sword. The entire Yuehua enchantment was covered by overflowing sparks. There was a satisfying smile at the corner of Song Ting's mouth, and everything seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Yan Fan didn't feel nervous because of this, but was still smiling as if not worried. On the contrary, Xianjun Guangyue was the most nervous, and seemed to be ready to stop the 2 fighting. But the originally silent fairy palace began to whisper. Who do you think can win these 2? Is it necessary to say? It must be the disciple of the Tsangting immortal sovereign's seat who won. You haven't seen his kendo. Good guy, even the same realm Dian immortals can't get close to him. Yes, that immortal is definitely not good. It is not easy to be able to survive until now. If you continue to fight, you will probably vomit blood. In the Yuehua barrier, under the rushing sword intent, the black-clothed youth has completely entered the state, but in just a few dozen breaths, he has drawn out 90,000 swords. However, what made him a little surprised was that Jian Wushuang actually resisted all of them under these 90,000 swords. How can that be? Have you squeezed enough? A voice sounded quietly. The black-clothed youth was startled. What? His response was a heavy kick. Boom! Under this foot, he flew upside down for 100 feet, and only after knocking out a crack in the Yuehua barrier, he was able to stop his body. Jian Wushuang retracted the kicked right foot, shook his wrist and said coldly, "If you are tickling like this, I think it can be over." What? The black-clothed youth's figure was shocked, and the 90,000 swords he squeezed out with all his strength were only tickling in his eyes? You are looking for death. He burst into tears, and million sword intent burst out of the fairy body at this moment. Then, these million sword intents condensed into a huge treasure behind him, almost breaking the entire Yuehua barrier. Dangu sword Dao dash, as the black-clothed youth screamed, the huge treasure behind him also moved, slashing down with a huge épée in both hands. Jian Wushuang, who was standing still on the spot, felt that the top of his head was covered. He couldn't avoid it, and could only face this ancient sword. At this moment, Wu Jinying directly blessed. Jian Wushuang did not release Wushuang's sword, but used the flowing cloud grass sword style. As another kendo, the whole spectrum of Luyun grass sword style represents vigor and exuberance, which can protect Jian Wushuang from any serious damage to the maximum. Luyun grass sword style, 7 style. The grass leaves turn green. The endless emerald green sword intent rises into the sky, turning into blades of grass, brazenly facing that ancient sword. At this moment, even the Yuehua barrier began to be filled with cracks. Good boy, you have split this sword, instead of choosing to fight it hard. It's amazing. Yan Fan muttered in a low voice. His appreciation was beyond words. Song Ting on the side was also shocked to the extreme. As a quasi-sword fairy, how could he not detect Jian Wushuang's intentions? This is completely breaking the thunder blow with the least cost. Young man in black, this sword has been defeated. Thousands of grass and leaves brazenly confronted him, and then under the gaze of all Dayan immortals, they calmly split the black-clothed youth's ancient sword. This scene is too plain, but too shocking. The young man in black didn't even react. His kendo treasure was completely disintegrated, leaving no trace. The emerald sword intent also disappeared, replaced by another sword intent, a lonely sword intent. Jian Wushuang stood with his hand in his hand, his robe fluttered in the wind, and countless sword intent blossomed from his feet. At this moment, he took the lead in cutting out a sword. Wushuang Kendo Zingeheijianyani, the second style. River. The lofty Tianhe swept across from the sky, and even directly tore open the Yuehua barrier under the Guangyue immortal monarch. Then countless sword intents rushed up, converging together into the broadest Kendo river. At this moment, the entire fairy palace was completely shaken, and all the white clothes were panicked to the extreme and began to subconsciously retreat. They all felt an extremely strong threat. Song Ting and Guangyue Xianjun all stood up, their eyes completely solemn. This power has made them feel uneasy. Yan Fan laughed and said loudly, "Happy, happy. I saw this sword again." Jiang Li, who has rarely spoken all the time, has a reddish complexion, and he is obviously warlike. Jian Wushuang's sword. Jian Zhenshin Palace. At this moment his figure completely disappeared, only the vast Kendo Tianhe rushed forward. There was only unbelievable in the eyes of the black-clothed youth. Faced with this mighty sword intent, he could not even rise to resist. However, as the Kendo Tianhe got closer and closer, he finally gritted his teeth abruptly and directly raised the heavy sword in his hand to greet him. The clothes on the upper body of the black-clothed youth instantly exploded, and the fairy body expanded several times. The heavy sword in his hand easily tore through the space and slashed towards the Kendo Tianhe. Boom! The unspeakable martyrdom exploded in the fairy palace, eclipsing all the stars and full moon. The Ape 100,000 swords all slashed forward, but only smashed the Tianhe for several meters, and then all the swords with the people were swallowed into the Tianhe. Like mountains and seas will be poured, only Tianhe surging. The fairy palaces are like lone boats in the wild sea, crumbling. Xianjun Guangyue successively released his power to stabilize the palace, then looked at Yan Fan and said angrily, "Look at the good things your apprentice has done." Yan Fan shrugged, then looked at Song Ting, whose face was as gray as death, and said proudly, "How about Song Ting?" Song Ting was still in shock, turning a deaf ear to Yan Fan's ridicule. Jian Wushuang's sword completely exceeded his imagination. How could this terrifying and unimaginable sword be released by a small swordsman? Even though he is a quasi-sword fairy, after seeing this sword, he has the idea of going all out. And this sword, naturally, can never be released by a swordsman, a small Zhao Yangxian. Chapter 4971. When the Kendo Tianhe was completely suspended above the entire fairy palace, it directly stopped flowing, as if it had solidified. In the next moment, the Kendo Tianhe burst into pieces, and the endless stream of light spilled over the entire fairy palace. All the white clothes looked at the dome of the fairy palace and were shocked again. I saw under the dome, as the sword Tianhe dissipated, two figures appeared. The sword has no double-faced color as usual, as indifferently as if nothing had happened, but at this moment, his right arm stretched out against the heart of the black-clothed youth. The exposed fairy body of the black-clothed youth was densely covered with scars, and drips of divine blood poured out from the wounds, which was difficult to stop. He looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. His face looked like ashes. If the fingers that touched his heart were replaced by a real sword, he would have disappeared and the fairy body would be broken. Time seemed to stagnate. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm, did not say a word, and then fell on the ground of the fairy palace. At this moment, all the white clothes as well as Cangting and Guangyue Xianjun looked at Jian Wushuang together, all in disbelief. With the power of cultivating immortals, it was beyond imagination to win an all-out 3-tier Dian immortal so easily. Yan Fan grabbed Jian Wushuang and laughed, "Awesome!" Cangting sat back where he was, with a look of despair. Afterwards, the young man in black also fell from midair, looking at Jian Wushuang with a complex expression. He seemed to be still immersed in that scene, and he hadn't recovered from his fears. He could never think that he would lose, and there was no room for defeat. How? Cangting, who wins and who loses? Yan Fan turned to look at the desperate Cangting and asked with a smile. Cangting slowly raised his head and stared at him, before saying for a while, "I lost, and I will give you what you want now." After he finished speaking, he directly stretched out his hand and flipped it, and immediately a series of ancient, incomprehensible sword patterns emerged from his palm. This is Cangting's kendo. But the kendo he released only appeared for a moment, even if Xian was directly dispelled by a force. Cangting raised his head and looked at Yan Fan with a smirk. "Okay, let's say it's a decent old friend. I don't want to copy your old friend. Besides, do you think I am coveting your kendo? How do I say it is also a sword fairy? I just want to show off my apprentice to you today." Having said that, Yan Fan couldn't help laughing out loud anymore. But Cangting's complexion changed several times, and in the end only helplessness remained. Guangyue Xianjun, who rushed over, also shook his head helplessly. The free and easy middle-aged man in front of him seemed to be the same as before, without any change. "It's all right, the wine is drunk, the words are spoken, and the fight is done. We should go." Yan Fan waved his hand and said, "We still have things to do, so we won't chat with you." "Hold on, just leave like this?" Cangting said coldly, making the atmosphere of the entire fairy palace fall into silence again. Then he cleared his throat and said again, "Guangyue, don't keep it, move out all the remaining moon dew. There is not a drop left if you don't drink today. No one wants to leave." "Okay, don't give it away. I may see you when it's okay. It's just like our relationship." Standing on the fairy palace square, Yan Fan waved his hand and said, in order to avoid Guangyue Xianjun's scorching hot gaze, his whole figure almost shrank behind Jian Wushuang. Xianjun Guangyue narrowed his gaze to the bottom of his eyes, then came to Jian Wufang, looking at him with elder eyes. Jian Wushuang raised his mouth unnaturally. Then Guangyue Xianjun directly stretched out his hand and raised his right arm, placing an object in his palm. "You are his apprentice. This is the meeting gift I give you. It is very useful to open it later on the occasion of life and death." In the palm of the palm, there is a full moon with hazy moonlight, which is extremely beautiful. Jian Wushuang couldn't laugh or cry, but didn't refuse the kindness of Emperor Guangyue, so he solemnly put it in his arms after thanking him. And Cangting and Yan Fan went side by side, walking in the forefront. "You have accepted a good apprentice whose future achievements are never below you, and it will only be a matter of time before you reach the Sword Fairy." Yan Fan smiled when he heard the words. "My goal is not only to get him to the Sword Fairy, maybe to advance to a more difficult-to-guess realm." "So confident?" Cangting looked at him. Yan Fan sighed slightly and then said, "It's not that I am confident, but that he convinced me that his future is more than just a Sword Fairy." "Do you know why I was calm after he defeated your apprentice?" "Why?" "Because I know he can easily defeat your apprentice and even be beheaded instantly. It's also because I will target him, not your apprentice, but you." With the concentration of Cangting, Rao was shocked after hearing such shocking words. "Do you know what you're talking about? I'm the ninth rank Dian Immortal, and am only one line short of climbing the Sword Immortal. Even if I'm not against you, I won't be far worse." Yan Fan sighed again. "I know, but I still don't change my opinion, because I've discussed kendo with him before this. He blocked one of my swords and did it effortlessly." Cangting took a deep breath. "What you said is true? Although I don't have much truth, This sentence is absolutely true. Songting sighed faintly. If this is the case, I can no longer guess where his future will be. We can't see so far. The only thing we can do is to act as a guide. Yen Fan looked into the distance, thinking. By the way, you old boy haven't told me what's the realm of your apprentice. I saw at a glance that he was taking something and was promoted to Dayan. Song Ting smiled. Sure enough, nothing can escape your eyes. Yes, I did give him a kind of fruit that contains great luck. Yen Fan was completely shocked. Going, what jigua would be so defying that it can help break through the realm? He was full of pride. I will call it Hunyuan without sea fruit for the time being. Hunyuan no Haigua? What kind of name? Sounds so cheap. Ahem, be careful when you speak, this is what I call it. I knew it was you, old boy, who obviously didn't have a high style and had to pretend to be unpredictable. Having such a strange name has brought down the overall grade. Damn it, I won't say anything. Don't stop, you go on, let me see if I can try a few hundred for my apprentice. Are you a mud pill? Do you want to try out hundreds of them? The ultimate fruit that contains supreme fortune, you can get another one if you can't help it. Chapter 4972. After learning that the so-called Hunyuan Waheguo was born in a place called the Domain of No Seas, Yen returned with great interest. After directly setting out the real address of the domain without sea, he hurriedly took Jian Wushuang with him, preparing to go to the domain without sea. Remember, that free territory is a little weird. I was almost trapped when I brought my disciples into it, but with your 2-sword celestial guards, there should be no major problem. Song Ting's gaze was a little dignified. Yen Fan waved his hand. I know, I will be careful. When he was about to leave this Giyue Immortal Palace, suddenly a figure ran out of the Immortal Palace, his expression tense and firm. Looking at the figure about to go away, the young man in black said loudly, Can I ask your name? I want to write it down and fight with you again in the future. Jian Wushuang stopped where he was, and the corner of his mouth pulled out a radiant, Jian Wushuang. The 3 bodies were like stars and streamers, coming and going in a hurry, and disappeared into the boundless sea in a flash. Jian Wushuang. I took it down. The black-clothed youth murmured, his eyes finally firm. Putting away his sullen expression, Song Ting looked at his disciple, and his pride was revealed without any cover. Lao Tzu's disciples are not bad either. I really want to see how they will grow by then. At this moment, Xianjun Guangyue lacked the kind of hazy moonlight that couldn't be looked at directly, and was a bit more lonely. Her thoughts seemed to have returned to that too long time. Sometimes, endless longevity may not be a good thing for Yanxian. The countless ancient battles and nihilistic years have made them think about the ultimate meaning of existence. After leaving the Giyue Immortal Palace, there has been no news about Diqing. Although this is only a short period of time, Jian Wushuang is also more worried. You must know that the longer the timeline is, the possibility of finding a clear truth will expand indefinitely. Because the entire borderless sea has no boundaries, it is almost equivalent to a universe, and the difficulty of finding a Dayan in such a universe full of fatal dangers can be imagined. Originally Jian Wushuang wanted to continue looking for Diqing aimlessly, but was directly led by Yen Fan on his way to the realm of no sea. Good disciple, you just follow us. I paid a lot of money to get this news from the old boy in Songding. You can be sure that you will become Dayan immortal after eating that kind of Hunyuan without sea fruit. Seeing Yen Fan, who was very excited, Jian Wushuang felt a little helpless. Climbing into the realm of Dayan immortal from Yanxian is a difficult and almost impossible thing. How could there be some kind of fruit that contains atmospheric luck, which can have such an unimaginable effect against the sky? You must know that even the former emperor of the 6 Crow Emperors did not have such a treasure of promotion. Therefore, Jian Wushuang did not hold much hope and confidence in this. A realm without seas, there are places in this sea without seas that are not seas. It's not that this old kid fooled me again. As he continued to move forward, Yen Fan began to doubt the real position that Songting gave him. Jiang Li said at this moment, "Of course there is. You have to know that in this borderless sea, there is something that will not sink in the sea and will not be swallowed by any force. You mean the corpse of Yen Xian? Yen Fan touched his chin. If that is the case, then Hunyuan Weheguo might have been born in that place. Jiang Li curled his lips, showing no trace of disgust. What kind of ghost name? So weird? Yen Fan touched his nose. I also think it's amazing, but as long as you can rise to the realm of Dian Immortal, it will be a good fruit. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly when he heard the words. He knew his own situation best. He had realized before that there was no source of immortality and he could hardly reach the realm of Dian Immortal. This is why, even if he is extremely proficient in the use of the immortal style and realizes the strong sword, he cannot be promoted to Dian Immortal. Without the reason of Xian Yuan, Jian Wushuang's promotion journey was completely blocked. But he still has the last ray of hope. If Hunyuan Weheguo can really allow him to enter the realm of Dian Immortal, then he will be able to easily crush rank 6 Dian Immortal. So he also looks forward to it. With 2 true sword celestial beings following them, they moved forward at a speed of 10,000 li in a flash, almost able to traverse a celestial domain in a few breaths. This is the case, it took a long time to travel to the land without sea. When the endless black sea in front of him was replaced by the gray-white land plain, even with Jian Wushuang's concentration, he couldn't help but be surprised. Those that make up the gray-white land plain are not other things, but messy bones. The endless bones, shrouded in a unique barren, dead breath, make the viewer's heart palpitations involuntarily. This is simply a scene left only by a great battle between the ancients, and the land plain composed of endless fairy bones is even wider than the heaven and land plain where the frontier was located. After seeing this scene, even Yen Fan couldn't help but slap his tongue. Good fellow, how many deaths did you form here? It's really magnificent. Be careful, there may still be living things here. Jiang Li frowned slightly. Are you sure that Hunyuan no Haiguo is here? Yen Fan nodded affirmatively and then pointed to the front. Absolutely here. You see here, there is no order and heavenly restrictions. Yanli is in a state of chaos and unknown, which is quite in line with the meaning of Hunyuan, the old man of Tsangting. The kid sums it up well. Looking around, Jian Wushuang soon felt that what Yen Fan said was not unreasonable. You read www. The land of Akanchu.com, which is made up of endless bones of immortals, is already a land of no heaven and chaos. Let's go, find the fruit first, this little corpse field is nothing. Yen Fan said, and flew to the sealess area first. You are walking behind me, no matter what crisis you encounter, don't do it yet. Jiang Li also walked forward after an exhortation. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then stepped into this sealess realm after he was covering his entire body with his strength. Step into it with one step, and the unknown and chaotic power will come. The strength of a sword, like a sword, kept cutting the strength of the surface of the fairy body, causing Jian Wushuang to feel a slight discomfort. Seeing his discomfort, Jiang Li casually dispelled the chaos around Jian Wushuang and formed a barrier around him with his sword intent before he stopped. Thank you. Jian Wushuang solemnly thanked him. Hearing this, Jiang Li raised his eyebrows slightly and said with a faint smile, Remember, I will call my wife in the future. Chapter 4973. Then, before he could react, Jiang Li turned and walked forward. Rubbing his nose, Jian Wushuang followed up immediately. The endless bones of the immortal underneath, I don't know how long it has been gone, there is no fairy rhyme, and it is full of death and desolation. Looking around, they were all Yenxian bones, and there was no other living aura. But the more so, the more vigilant it is. This is an unbreakable truth. Yen Fan walked in the forefront. He was so lazy as usual, it seemed that he didn't care about all crises. And one of these details made Jian Wushuang close his eyes. It was the Yenxian bones under his feet. None of them received any trauma, and they were preserved intact. You know, this is almost impossible in the borderless sea. If you want to build a land on the borderless sea, you must kill the immortals and use their bones as land. And this naturally can't avoid conflict. As long as there is conflict, the bones of the fairy will be incomplete. But from the point of view of the moment, these fairy bones were too complete, as if they had died voluntarily. This faintly made Jian Wushuang feel something wrong, but he didn't know what was wrong. Strange, why didn't I feel the breath of that fruit? Yen Fan asked with his chin in doubt. They had been stepping into this sealess area for a period of time. If there is that kind of air transport fruit that has the anti-sky effect, I am afraid that it is absolutely impossible to hide the breath. This is why Yen Fan is strange. But shortly after he said this, an unimaginable rich breath followed. That kind of rich aura contained unimaginable atmospheric luck, which made Jian Wushuang unable to calm down for a moment. Good guy, just ahead. Yen Fan was overjoyed. The old boy in Songting didn't lie to me. They'll follow and get the fruits as soon as possible. Jian Wushuang nodded and galloped forward without any hesitation. No matter what the final result is, he must seize this opportunity. After all, he has no way to break through the realm of Dian Immortal, so he can't give up any chance. When they came to the very center of the entire sealess realm, the thing that contained the supreme atmosphere of luck, they could see thoroughly. It was an unimaginable and extremely huge towering tree. The brown branches, the emerald green tree cover, and even the cinnamon tree that had previously supported the entire Guiyue Immortal Palace were huge. And the supreme atmosphere that is so rich that it can hardly be removed, it is flowing from the towering giant tree. Good fellow, it seems that this fairy tree bears more than one fruit. Yen Fan said with a smile, seeming to be extremely satisfied. Then he watched Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and smiled. Apprentice, see the teacher pick a few hundred for you today to try it out. Without waiting for Jian Wushuang to answer, Yen Fan's figure flashed straight forward. But the feeling of anxiety in Jian Wushuang's heart became even stronger. As if to prove his idea, when Yen Hui urged him to go to the fairy tree, the fairy corpse under his feet suddenly shook. Then the fairy corpse instantly cracked, and thousands of huge tree roots were drilled from under the center of the earth. Each root of the tree is so huge that it can't be added, even a real dragon can't compare with it. The roots of these trees were all besieged to Yen Fan in the first place. But Jiang Li seemed to have foreseen long ago, and suddenly drew his sword. This was the only second time Jian Wushuang saw Jiang Li's shot, and the first shot in front of the Guiyue Immortal Palace. Although it was only a single blow, it surprised all Dian Immortals. And this time, Jiang Li quickly drew a long sword from his waist and cut straight forward. Although there was only one blow, 1,000 sword intents were instantly differentiated. Every one is the strongest sword intent. Nearly 1,000 sword intents slashed forward, smashing the giant tree roots into pieces in an instant. Yen Fan had already reacted, reaching out his hand and completely shattered the remaining roots. But then, a more majestic force burst out from the whole body of the fairy tree and forced Yen Fan back. Those who covet my fruit, die. A sound that shook the sky and the earth followed from the fairy tree, and then the branches split, exposing a huge mouth. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was slightly shocked. Such an immortal tree, which was fed by countless celestial bones, surged into an unimaginable general trend. This general trend, even beyond the power of rank 6 Dian Immortal, has the power of rank 9. Yen Fan slapped his lips. Good fellow, I said why the old man in Songting had to persuade me to be vigilant. It turns out that this strange tree has reached rank 9. Jiang Li pursed his lips. Is that the reason for you? Ill persuade? I'm a sword immortal, okay? Yen returned with anger and didn't fight. Dare you look down on me? Jiang Li raised his head and nodded the fairy giant tree in front of him with his chin. Go and chop it down, and prove yourself in front of me and the disciple. Okay, Jiang Li, wait for you. Yen Fan resented, then rushed forward angrily. Those who covet my fruit, die. The fairy giant tree made a sound that shook the sky and the earth again, and then twisted the root of the tree, which was bigger than the real dragon, and smashed it towards Yen Fan. Yen Fan, who was angry, did not draw his sword, but pointed it out directly. Thousands of sword intents were swept out in an instant, and the tree roots were easily crushed into powder. Are you going to hand it over by yourself, or wait for me to cut you into 2 pieces and find out by yourself? Yen Fan said coldly. The fairy giant trees whose roots were cut one after another seemed to have tasted pain, and the crown of the tree that was so huge that it bordered the sky began to shake. But it also seemed to be extremely angry, and the huge mouth on the branch said wildly, "Today I am dead, and I will never give up a Taoist fruit. I will turn you all into nourishment." "It's really noisy." Yen Fan picked her ears, and then rushed forward. Next is an extremely shocking scene. A fight that was almost one-sided and without any suspense began. Facing a real sword immortal, and the realm of Dian immortal of rank 9, this immortal giant tree was destined to be a giant sandbag. The broken roots, the torn-apart tree canopy, the wailing that almost never stopped, walked in the center of the entire fairy land. After hitting the back, Jian Wushuang couldn't bear it. The fate of this fairy giant tree was really miserable, but it was indeed hard-spirited. Apart from howling, he didn't even ask for mercy. Just as Yen Fan was about to cut off the waist of the giant sloth, a voice resounded like a gossamer, "But panic. Don't fight. I give it to you, I give it all to you. Say it early, and it's going to be all right. I have to take you apart before I will hand it over." Chapter 4974. Yen Fan murmured dissatisfiedly, and then retracted his palm. "Hurry up. Give me as many as you need. 180 are not too many. If you dare to give me one, I will have to tear down you today." The immortal giant tree was dying, and when he heard this, he wailed again, "180, were you mud pills at that time? This is the Tao fruit that I bear, and only one can be born every other year." He scratched his head when he heard the words, "Then you have to hand over as many as you have. My apprentice will be promoted today. If the promotion is successful, your benefits will be indispensable." "Well, I only have 2. Even if you destroy me today, there are only 2. The fairy giant tree said, dying. Yen Fan didn't bother to listen to his nonsense, and directly kept beckoning. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang and Jiang Li looked at each other, then swept over. Then, under the miracle of Yen Fan's great strength, the forcing fairy giant tree spit out 2 palm-sized fruits in succession. The moment the emerald green fruit appeared, the space of hundreds of millions of miles was filled with unimaginable luck. This kind of air luck actually began to slowly construct the rules of heaven when it swayed through the air. Strands of dense ancient patterns flow quietly in the air, so that the original desolate and silent aura disappears without a trace. Yen Fan and Jiang Li said anxiously at the same time, "Swallow it." Jian Wushuang, who had originally wanted to reject it, had to cheeky, picking up a fruit of luck and swallowing it directly. In the next moment, the fruit of luck directly turned into 1,000 radiant flowers, flowing down his throat and into his limbs. Okay. A tyrannical force that could not be added suddenly broke through all the obstacles in his meridian and began to circulate back and forth. At the same time, wisps of divine blood burst out from every pore of his fairy body, and in a flash, bleeding fog came. Jian Wushuang hurriedly sat cross-legged to thoroughly digest and absorb the air transport in the body. Seeing this scene, Yen Fan couldn't help but smile. Yes, it seems that promotion to Dian Immortal is already a sure thing. Jiang Li also nodded slightly. They were extremely optimistic about Jian Wushuang's talent, and it could even be said that it didn't really matter whether they had this fruit of luck. They believed that Jian Wushuang would definitely be able to ascend the realm of Dian Immortal for no more than a year. This fruit of luck is just an advancement of the established facts. Seeing Jian Wushuang's breath continuously circulating and the various great auras circulating each other, Jiang Lian didn't relax either. Work together to set an enchantment and guide the air transport in another fruit to him. The luck in this fruit is so great that it makes the immortal body a bit difficult. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's spirit and thoughts were united, guiding the air luck in the limbs and hundreds of skeletons, and jointly attacking the non-existent obstacle. Time passed by, shaking the chi luck for 9 days, and all began to return to his body, and then all the visions disappeared. And Yen Fan, who was watching this scene nervously, was slightly startled. It's over. Jiang Li frowned slightly. obviously also a little puzzled. After a while, Jian Wushuang also slowly opened his eyes, and a touch of disappointment flashed deep in his eyes. Yan Fan said nervously, "What? How is it?" He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I still failed. Fucking, I knew that old boy in Songting was unreliable. I will uproot this tree now." Yen returned angrily, then turned around to pull the tree. "Wan, what's the matter with me? I only provide the fruit, but it doesn't guarantee that he will rise steadily." The fairy giant tree shivered, almost shaking. At this time, Jian Wushuang also took action to stop Yan Fan. "It's really nothing to do with it. That fruit does contain the fortune that can be improved, but this is my own reason." "But?" He hesitated to speak, then stopped, and finally said, "It's okay, or you can break through by taking a few pills." Hearing the words, the fairy tree said in a low voice, "I have given you all the last two, I don't have any." Yan Fan snorted coldly, "Is it not your decision, but my decision?" The fairy giant tree sighed, and then said very angrily, "I live in a corner, just want peace of mind to enlighten the Tao and bear the fruit. Why do you always seize my Tao fruit? A tree will not be fruitful if you honestly bear fruit, so there is so much emotion." Yan Fan whispered, "Hurry up and give me 5 more fruits and we will leave." "Where do I have so many fruits? In addition to you, a strong man came not long ago, wounded me, and took away a Tao fruit from me, plus the 2 in your hands. It's all mine." The fairy giant tree wailed, and after a long sigh, he said nothing. But Jian Wushuang, who was standing by the side, suddenly seemed to realize something and suddenly raised his head to look at the fairy giant tree. "What did you just say? Other Dayan immortals visited you not long ago? What does he look like? Are his eyes red gold and 9 colored feathers between the tips of his hair?" After a long silence, the fairy giant tree said again, "How did you know? Are you accomplices with him?" In his mind was like a 9-day thunder, and Jian Wushuang's heart was like beating a drum. What he described just now is exactly the appearance of Di Qing. Right now, under this misunderstanding, he actually learned of Di Qing's whereabouts. How did this make him unexcited? "Then tell me, where is he now?" Jian Wushuang asked anxiously. "I don't know, calm, but can feel that he has not gone far, otherwise he knows nothing." The fairy giant tree said, and then continued to silence. He stopped asking but quickly thought about it. The news he got from the fairy tree proved that Di Qing had been here not long ago, and Jian Wushuang and the others were probably still in the plane of heaven and land. The distance between them was no less than half a year, but with the strength of the Nineth-ranked Dayan immortal, he could definitely walk a considerable distance. But the fairy giant tree felt that Di Qing had not gone far, so it was very likely that Di Qing should have been severely traumatized, and thus found a safe place to hide. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore, and turned around to look for Di Qing's whereabouts. "How about it? Do you know the whereabouts of your friend?" Yan Fan asked in a condensed voice. He nodded. "It is very likely that he has not left here. I want to find him as soon as possible, so as not to make waves again." Yan Fan nodded. "Okay, then we will go along with you and protect your safety." Chapter 4975. Leaving from the land of immortal bones in the realm of no sea, Jian Wushuang finally sighed, unable to hide his loss. He swallowed a hunyuan without sea dao fruit, and he did not have any breakthrough in his realm. The supreme air luck contained in the fruit was only divided and absorbed by the 3 great roads, and failed to break through the realm at all. In other words, Jian Wushuang could no longer break through, and the realm of Yanxian was his ultimate destiny. Without a source of immortality, he has no possibility of being promoted to the realm, and his highest realm from now on will only be the immortal. This is undoubtedly fatal. Even if Jian Wushuang can now kill rank 3 Dayan immortal, even in the state of Sandao, he can kill rank 6 Dayan immortal, but this can't change his upper limit. The highest limit is immortal Yen. In the future, when facing rank 9 Dayan immortal, he will only end up being easily killed. Could it be that all of this really cannot be changed? The Tao fruit that the giant tree bears contains the supreme air luck that is too terrifying, enough to allow a fairy to climb into the realm of Dian. It was precisely because of this that Jian Wushuang became more worried. He couldn't believe that he would actually be trapped in Yanxian, and he could no longer make breakthroughs. The realm of Dianxian was already in sight. Perhaps it was the loss of Jian Wushuang's eyes that Yan Fan reached out and patted him on the shoulder, and then said grinningly, "This must be the problem of that and fruit, master. I still like you as always. You will definitely be able to visit Dian Immortal in 2017. I think it took Jiang Li and Jiang Li to be promoted to the realm of Dian Immortal for a long time. After all, promotion to Dian Immortal is not that simple." Jiang Li also raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Yan Fan is right. You will be promoted to Dian Immortal in at least 1 year, because you are much better than us." Immediately afterwards, Yan Fan gave him the last remaining Qi Luck Dao fruit. "Today is indeed too hasty. Once there are signs of a breakthrough in the future, I will eat this fruit, and I will definitely break through once." Seeing the Tao fruit in his hand that was completely wrapped in Yanli and had no luck at all, Jian Wushuang's heart was extremely warm, and then he solemnly thanked him. Okay, you can't be so polite to us from now on. These are all the duties of a master." Yan Fan still said with a smile, "The top priority now is to find your friend first." He nodded, and then a group of 3 people rushed to the distant sea of no edge. The so-called endless sea is endless, and even Dian Immortal can be lost in it, and the difficulty of finding a Dian Immortal in this one can be imagined. Judging from the perception ability of the fairy giant tree, I am afraid that it will take a long time to find the truth in the next time. But Jian Wushuang still decided to find Di Qing, no matter how long it took. After all, Di Qing was banished in the Sea of No Edge because of himself. With the continuous advancement, the Sea of Boundlessness returns to dead silence and coldness. Jian Wushuang was thinking about some issues as he walked forward. It has been a long time since he entered the Sea of No Edge. Although he has gone through several battles, he still feels that the Dian Immortal who is trapped in the Endless Sea does not seem to be as sinful as he imagined, and it can even be said that it is impossible to be exiled. Especially Zhang Lian's return to these 2 sword immortals, as well as the Guangyue Immortal in the Guiyue Immortal Palace, the Tsangting Immortal, and a kind of white-robed Dian Immortal, none of them have the bloodthirsty violence. Some are just pure. These detach true shackles, and even the strongest ones who can compete for the Emperor's luck, are now exiled in the Sea of No Edge. Jian Wushuang guessed that all of this was most likely the exile led by Zhen Wuyang after he ascended to the throne of the Emperor. Just when he couldn't help but want to ask some questions, the endless waters in the distance suddenly swept up to kill. Yan Fan frowned. "It's really a bunch of guys. During the time I was asleep, the Sea of Borders has been so messy?" Jiang Li also said, "You have slept for so many years, this place is already messier than you think. Then simply kill it, not see and not bother you," he said again, his palm already quietly holding the hilt of his waist. In this short moment, all those murderous breaths rushed in. There are a total of more than 20 figures, like a dark stream. And these figures are all chasing the front figure at this moment. After a short while, a voice that was almost astonished by the soul came from a distance. "The hero ahead, help." Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed slightly, and the majestic power was already gathered between his palms. With the sound resounding, a skinny figure, wearing a sloppy and incomparable Taoist robe, came behind Jian Wushuang in an instant, and then disappeared strangely and inexplicably. The remaining 20-odd people, surrounded by terrifying body shapes, stopped directly in front of them. Each of them was actually a 3rd-ranked Dian Immortal. "Hand over the evil thief." The leader, Dian Xian, said in a cold voice, directly releasing Yanlipi training and surrounding Jian Wushuang's 3 people. "If you don't call out, don't blame us for being polite." Jian Wushuang shook his head secretly, sighed, and did not speak again. If these Dian Immortals had asked in a good way at first, it would really be possible to know the whereabouts of that guy, but now, there is only one dead end waiting for them. Yan Fan didn't even bother to draw his sword. He waved it casually, and hundreds of strong sword intent burst out, strangling them all into pieces. It only took a few breaths from speaking to it until it was all broken into minced meat. Sword intent returned to 1, Yen Fankai said in a cold voice, noisy. Regarding the enemy, or potential disadvantages, he simply shot even far beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. However, the strongest person who can survive in the age of the ancient times, I am afraid that there is no softest place in his heart. Waved and wiped out more than 23 Turndian immortals and turned them into powder, Yen Fan immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. And Jian Wushuang also said coldly at this moment, if you hide again, you will definitely end up not much better than them. After a moment of silence, a voice that could not contain fear suddenly sounded. The 3 fairy monarchs are forgiving, and the old Daojiang parade is here to thank the 3 fairy monarchs for their virtue. The space was rippling, and the figure that had originally disappeared knelt directly in front of Jian Wufang, his 5 bodies thrown on the ground, shaking like chaff. Seeing this scene, the murderous Jian Wushuang had already begun to attack, but he said in a cold voice, why do you want to bring disaster to us? Are you afraid that we will also kill you? Chapter 4976. The sloppy Taoist who claimed to be the old Daojiang parade, his 5-bodied body was directly shocked, and then he shook and wailed. The 3 immortal monarchs don't know something, and the little old Dao is also forced to be helpless. It is really desperate to be intercepted by them, so they have to ask for refuge. If the 3 fairy kings are still extremely angry, they can destroy the little old Dao at any time. After Jian Wushuang and Jiang Lian looked at each other, they said coldly, leave. Thanks to the 3 immortal monarchs and virtues. The sloppy Taoist bowed heavily, and then climbed up from the void with gratitude. Only then did Jian Wushuang see the true meaning of this old way. A shaggy and withered hair was arbitrarily pulled behind his head by a bone hairpin, revealing a face with sunken eye sockets and dry yellow, and the 2-faced 8 character who added a bit of wretchedness. And under the open robes, a pair of bare ribs made Jian Wushuang a little doubtful about how this guy lived until now. Yen Fan curled her lips, and then turned around to leave. Just when they all set off to leave, the old Daojiang who was standing there and did not intend to leave, suddenly said, 3 fairy monarchs, what do you have to do? Leave if you don't want to die. After Jian Wushuang left this sentence without looking back, he set off. And the Lao Daojiang parade seemed to be hesitating. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, the 3 fairy monarchs and Xiao Lao Dao have traveled here for several years. They know any place. If necessary, I am willing to follow along. Jian Wushuang quietly stopped. In the next moment, 36,000 sword intent burst out from him, directly strangling and marching towards the river. Seeing the terrifying sword intent coming over the sky, Lao Daojiang did not flee in a hurry in the parade, but closed his eyes and motionless. The sky is trembling, and the sea of no edge has set off waves of great magnitude. Time seemed to stagnate. At this moment, the 36,000 sword intents did not slash towards Jiang, but hovered in front of him. Thousands of sword intents became one afterwards. Jian Wushuang came to him, reached out and grabbed the collar of his Taoist robe, and lifted it up. What is your purpose? Jiang Yugong even said something unfavorable. I have no purpose, just want to report the life-saving grace of the 3 immortals. No, if you're talking more nonsense, the sword is on your body. Jian Wushuang said coldly, and then threw it away. Jiang Gang was dumb, and finally murmured, but I. Jian Wushuang, who turned around and was about to leave, stopped and said in a condensed voice, how sure are you to find a Dayan immortal in this borderless sea? He was taken aback, and quickly reacted and said, it is difficult to return to Xianjun, but if the conditions are to be included in this area, it should not be a particularly difficult thing, because here is where Yen Xian can stay. Not many, and I just happen to know. Who does Xianjun want to find? Jian Wushuang stopped paying attention to him. Don't ask so much if you don't know, just follow us. Above the boundless sea, the sloppy old Daojiang parade closely followed Jian Wushuang. At the same time, he waved his hand to take out something from the tattered Taoist robe, and then threw it above the sea. It rose hundreds of feet in the storm, forming a true treasure ship. The three immortals are going to board the Real boat. In order to avoid some unopened Dian immortals from disturbing the itinerary, it is the best choice to travel by boat. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate too much, and then took Jiang Lian back to board the ship. In a flash of millions of miles, the true treasure ship shuttled at an extremely fast speed. Jiang Gongju sat on the bow of the ship and concentrating on controlling the direction. Jian Wushuang walked forward and asked, "Have you ever seen a 9-ranked Dian immortal who has been traumatized and has 9 colored feathers in his hair? I haven't seen it before, but in the next sea area we arrive, there should be the one Xianjun wants to find." Jiang Gang said very simply. Jian Wushuang was not too disappointed when he heard this. After all, the news about Diqing was too small for this boundless sea. Don't worry, if your friend is going to suffer some trauma, he won't be too far away from here. Maybe he can find it in the next place. Yen Fan patted his shoulder and comforted. Jian Wushuang nodded, and the only thing left to do was to look for it with Jiang Gang's guidance. However, after shuttled out of the vast sea, Jiang Parade, who was concentrating on manipulating the real ship, suddenly changed his face. "No, there is something wrong ahead." As his voice fell, the vastness of the sea surface suddenly shook, as if there was a terrifying existence under the sea awakening. Hundreds of thousands of feet of dust surged up, like a heavenly gate rising from the sea, terrifying to the extreme. An unimaginable oppressive force squeezed in, and this sea gate composed of billions of meters of dust completely surrounded the Zibrozen ship. At this moment, even the sky was dimmed. Standing at the bow of the ship, apart from Jian Wushuang, Jiang Lian's face was solemn, and the palm of his hand was already quietly gripping the hilt of the waist. How could there be such a strange phenomenon, and there is still an immortal Yen who can control the sea area? Yen Fan murmured, and then looked at the river Parade sitting on the bow. But he quickly denied that it was Jiang Parade who was causing the trouble. After all, a mere rank 6 Dian immortal could not get over such a big wave. And Jiang Gang said in a trembled voice at this moment, "My dear princes, what shall we do next?" Yen Fan ignored him but looked at Jian Wushuang. "You will be behind us later, remember not to get in the water." Jian Wushuang nodded, his whole body has quietly condensed an invisible general trend. At this moment, Jiang Lian is all ready to go, is ready to cut off the sea. There is almost no possibility of evading the Tianmen sea screen, which is hundreds of millions of feet high, and can only choose to resist. When all of them were extremely solemn, only the old Dao Jiang, who was lying on the bow of the ship, showed an unusually calm complexion. At this moment, the Tianmen sea curtain, which is billions of feet high, is smashed down at this moment. It was as if the mountains and seas were about to fall. The terrifying general trend was like facing the siege of thousands of Dian immortals, making Jian Wushuang not slacking off. But the next moment, something changed suddenly. Jiang Parade, who was originally lying in the boat, suddenly swooped down on him, yelling, "There is a change in the sea of boundlessness, and none of us can escape." And until this moment, Jian Wushuang suddenly realized that this terrible and curious scene was not a real existence, but an illusion. Such a heavenly illusion actually deceived them all. "You old dog, I can't forgive you." Jian Wushuang was so angry that he couldn't add up. Chapter 4977. But despite the sound of his anger resounding, he was swallowed by the roar of the waves like Hong Zhong Dalu. Boom! Amidst the billions of meters of dust, the sea curtain of Tianmen blasted down. At the next moment, the horrible scene expected did not appear. The moment the Tianmen sea screen, which is more than billions of meters tall, crashed down, it disappeared. Everything is like a mirage, like a dream, like nothing happened. Only the mist convoluted by the dust waves spewed out, full of the breath of death and desolation. Jian Wushuang put down the palm that was blocking his eyes, and then looked forward. The sea is calm and silent. There is no other horrible scene before. Damn, it's an illusion? Yen Fan said in a deep voice, his eyes cold. Jiang Li also had a solemn expression, and the two sword immortals were also bewildered by this illusion. Jian Wushuang then retracted his gaze and hurriedly looked at the ship. But apart from the three of them, there is no other figure in the boat. The sloppy old Daojiang parade disappeared without a trace, not even a trace of it, as if it had never appeared before. Damn old thing, he really caused this illusion. Yan Fan said bitterly, I've noticed something wrong with him. Jian Wushuang was puzzled. But why did he do this? Willing to take the risk of being suspected? Jiang Li seemed to remember something. His expression slightly changed when he looked at him. Let's see if there is anything missing on you? Jian Wushuang was stunned when he heard the words, and then subconsciously touched his waist. The Bo Yang bottle containing the true shadow of the three emperors was still there. Not only was the Boyang bottle still there, but also the golden jade ring and some other treasures, all lying quietly in his arms. Everything is still there. What is this guy's calculation? Jian Wushuang whispered. Suddenly he remembered something and hurriedly touched his arms again. After a while, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. There is no luck, and the fruit, I think it was taken away by the old boy. What? Qi Luck Daoguo was stolen? Yan Fan's eyes widened. I want this old thing to die. Jian Wushuang stopped him. This guy's whereabouts are weird. Obviously, he has been eyeing the Qi Luck Dao fruit on my body before, so he set up such a heavenly fantasy to lure us into the bait. If we chase him next, in case we are confused by the illusion again, it will be a big loss because of a small loss. If a mere luck is gone, it will be gone. I have other ways. Yan Fan gritted his teeth secretly, although it is said that it is really detrimental to the prestige of this sword immortal to be placed by this old thing. If I want to find him, I will definitely thwart him. As he spoke, he hit the edge of the treasure ship again with a punch. With a chick, the hull torn apart. Fucking, this boat is actually made of paper? Some embarrassed to leave from the paper boat, Yan Fan was ashamed and almost wanted to lift the entire sea area upside down, catching the sloppy old way. And Jian Wushuang, who was used by this sloppy old way to perform illusion, was extremely depressed, and it was not a small loss that a Qi Luck Dao fruit was stolen. In the final analysis, everything that happened was actually because he was too credulous in the Dian Immortal in this endless sea. In any case, Jiang Gang gave him a lesson. After condensing their minds, the three of them rushed forward again. Not long after, a plane of heaven and land, which was also constructed from the bones of Yenxian, appeared. The heaven and land plane on this side was much smaller than the previously seen heaven and land plane, but when it was different from other barren heaven and land planes, there were fairy trees growing on the land here. The dense forest of fairy trees exudes a strange and calm atmosphere. How about it? Do you want to go in and have a look? Yan Fan asked. Jian Wushuang nodded without hesitation. There are not many land planes in this borderless sea. My friend will most likely be here. Jiang Lian nodded at the same time, and then first stepped into the heaven and land plane. Huh! The crisp cry resounded from the dense forest of fairy trees in an instant, and then a fairy bird with its wings spread out from the dense forest, opened its huge beak, and swallowed Jian Wushuang. As you can imagine, the huge bird head was almost torn in half by Yan's return. Have you ever seen a 9-ranked Dian Immortal with twin red eyes and 9 colored feathers in his hair? Jian Wushuang lay in front of the dying fairy bird and asked carefully. But what I got was a panic shaking his head. Let's go. Go ahead and take a look. Maybe you can find some clues. He said helplessly. Then, in the next period of time, this plane of heaven and land was almost turned upside down. All the Dian Immortals that were hit, as well as all kinds of fairy birds and beasts, were beaten violently, and then after questioning, they were allowed to leave. So back and forth, Jian Wushuang and the others didn't mean to get tired, but they didn't get tired of it. They reluctantly stopped until a magnificent flower covered the entire sky and land plane. Immediately after that, an uncontrollable angry voice resounded throughout the wild. Enough, let me stop. This seat has tolerated you for a long time, and repeatedly hurt my seat. Do you really think this seat is muddled? As this resentful voice fell, the huge and dense fairy trees were all swept open suddenly, and then a figure with wings on its back came. Behind this figure stood dozens of figures, each figure exuding a kind of terrifying force fluctuation. They are all Dayan immortals. The figure with huge wings on his back was a woman with a pretty and delicate face. With their eyes facing each other, both Jian Wushuang and Yen Fan looked at other places with a little embarrassment. There is no other reason, it is that the figure of this woman is too strong, and only the important parts are covered by feathers, and the beautiful figure is enough to see. Jiang Li snorted coldly, then stared at her. "Get out of the way." The woman was startled and immediately said angrily, "You actually let me go? Do you know who opened up this field? This seat is the supreme ruler here. Don't you hurt my seat, but now you dare to speak badly? Could it be that it's not going to die?" Jiang Li's face was cold, and he held the hilt in his palm to prepare for a thunderous blow. Yen Fan hurriedly stopped when he saw this, then looked at Jian Wushuang and said, "Apprentice, ask quickly." Jian Wushuang understood and immediately asked, "No offense. We came here just to find a friend. Have you ever seen a great fairy who was born with red and golden twin pupils and 9 colored feathers in his hair? Why should I tell you?" The woman with wings on her back said coldly, "It's you. You have to give me an explanation first, otherwise you will never be kind." Chapter 4978. Yen Fan put his hands on his hips and said with a face like a hob meat, "Explain? What kind of explanation? Aren't these all obvious questions? Your subordinates will come up to join in the fun whenever there is nothing to do. Of course, I just tidied up. Is this an account? Besides, I didn't kill them all. I just tried to teach you a lesson or two. It's enough to save you face." "You." The pretty woman with wings on her back was speechless for a while, and her silver teeth stared at them eagerly. Her extremely large-scale chest was ups and downs, and she seemed to be enduring strong anger, but she did not make the next move. She has a strong and clear intuition that none of the 3 body shapes at the moment are good. I am afraid that the entire Tianlu powerhouse will suppress it together, and they will not necessarily get the desired result. After a while, the pretty woman with wings on his back said in a deep voice, "Let's go. You'll take the blame for what happened just now. I just ask you to stop taking a step in this area." Yen Fan did not speak, but looked at Jian Wushuang. He then said slowly, "We really only wanted to find a friend when we came here. The previous thing was indeed that we did not do it right, but if we didn't do that, I'm afraid we would have been besieged long ago. Needless to say, you can go." The pretty woman said coldly, she just wanted to invite the 3 evil spirits away. Jian Wushuang didn't say much either. After nodding his head and agreeing, he finally said, "If you have ever met my friend, please let me know." After speaking these last words, they were about to turn around and leave. At this moment, the pretty woman with wings on her back suddenly said, "What is the relationship between the guy you just described and you? Why are you looking for him?" Jian Wushuang stopped walking and turned to look at her. "You know." "Answer my question first," she said in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang said, "He is an old friend of mine. For some reason, he was banished in this endless sea, and I came here because I was looking for him." The pretty woman asked again, "Then how do you prove that you are his friend?" He thought for a while, then shook his head. "It can't be proved, but if you have news about him, you must tell me. He is injured. I am afraid that his actions will be hindered in this sea of no edge." The water waves in the pretty woman's eyes seemed to be considering the authenticity of Jian Wushuang's words. After a while, she seemed determined to say, "The guy you mentioned, I know, and stayed with me for a while." Jian Wushuang's heart suddenly shook. He didn't expect to receive the news of Diqing again. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. I asked him to stay, but he refused." A frustration flashed in the pretty woman's eyes, and she continued, "He may not be too far away, saying that he can't find it soon." Jian Wushuang was overjoyed. As long as Diqing hadn't left the sea area, he would definitely be able to find out in a very short time. Thinking of this, he turned around and left without hesitation. "Wait a minute." At this time, the pretty woman hurriedly descended from the sky, then put her wings away and came to Jian Wushuang. "Are you really his friend? Otherwise?" Jian Wushuang said helplessly, The pretty woman's cheeks suddenly turned pink. Then if you are his friends, I will go find him with you. At the same time as her voice fell, all Dianxian said anxiously, Fuyao Xianjun, no, Tianlu can't be unowned. The pretty woman known as Fuyao Xianjun curled her lips slightly, and then said coldly, don't interrupt, this seat has its own arrangements. All Dian immortals were chilling, but still looked at her very nervously. And Jian Wushuang was also a little puzzled. Why are you with us? The pretty woman was flustered, her cheeks were even more red, and she stammered, why, there are so many why, I will go with you to find it. Hasn't it expanded the possibility of finding? Jian Wushuang didn't stop too much, shrugged and said, then go. When she heard this, her eyes were filled with joy. Well, wait for me for a moment, I will go with you right away. Then in the next period of time, all Dian immortals who had negative opinions were beaten by this Fuyao immortal monarch, and the force of the attack was not weaker than Yan Fan. It wasn't until these Dian immortals dared not to refute anymore, Xianjun Fuyao nodded in satisfaction, followed behind Jian Wushuang, and soared towards the borderless sea ahead. Shuttle over the sea, Xianjun Fuyao, who was behind Jian Wushuang, seemed to be thinking about something, and soon walked side by side with him, and asked a little embarrassedly, well, can I ask that guy's name? What do you do with this? Jian Wushuang was puzzled, more puzzled about her intentions. Yes, just want to know, you won't even tell this, right? Fuyao Xianjun said in a panic. He was helpless, Xinjin. Di Qing. What an overbearing name. Her face was reddish and she muttered to herself. Regarding her abnormal performance, Jian Wushuang was at a loss, but did not pay too much attention to it. After all, the most important thing is to find the truth right now. Immediately afterwards, Xianjun Fuyao said again, then can you tell me something about him before? Yan Fan answered her this time, I said little girl, if you ask me so carefully, isn't it because you have a feeling of admiration for the friend of my apprentice? The twitchy posture is not likable. Xianjun Fuyao flushed immediately. What? How can I like it? I just asked casually. Yan Fan smiled maliciously, then was slapped away by Jiang Li. And until then, Yu reads www.Com's reaction to Jian Wushuang, whose emotional reflection arc was quite long, finally knew why this Fuyao immortal monarch was so concerned about Diqing. It turned out that she had already borne that kind of hazy affection in her heart. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but smile. It seems that the truth of the countless years of being single seems to be close to him. Leaving Xianjun Fuyao's heaven and land plane, the four bodies were like a magnificent streamer, traveling for hundreds of millions of miles. The borderless sea began to truly enter the stage of desolation and silence. In the continuous deepening, above the endless sea, there is no longer any heaven and land plane composed of immortal bones. Jian Wushuang also worries about whether Di Qing will get lost in this sea area, making his search even more difficult. Just as they were moving forward, in the endless Black Sea, a waterline followed closely. Chapter 4979. Jian Wushuang, who was walking forward for a while, looked at Xianjun Fuyao beside him and asked, Is there any other heaven and land near your heaven and land plane? She immediately shook her head. It is an unimaginable thing to create a plane of heaven and land in this endless sea. Therefore, the sky and land are scarce to the extreme. Apart from the Fang Tianlu that I control, I have no idea. I know if there are other heaven and land here. However, I have also heard that in the extreme north, there is one of the largest heaven and land plains. The far north. Jian Wushuang whispered softly, Is Diqing just there? Just as he was thinking, Yan Fan's somewhat solemn voice also sounded, Be careful, a breath is coming closer to us. Except for the two sword immortals Jiang Lian, Jian Wushuang and Fuyao Xianjun were both strong, and they became vigilant almost instantly. Then, a strong and extremely powerful aura appeared from the sea behind him. Jian Wushuang immediately looked back and found that the powerful aura was a team of nearly 100 Dian immortals. This team can be called a powerful force. When Jian Wushuang spotted them, The team also noticed their existence. Every Dayan immortal in the team wore a wide black robe, completely shrouded his figure in it, the most mysterious. And in the middle of this team, there are 20 or 30 Dayan immortals who are dying, their limbs are bound by the Yanli chain, and they cannot move at all. After seeing the 4 Jian Wushuang, the team stopped and stood quietly on the opposite side. "We are in danger," Xianjun Fuyao whispered, his expression ugly to the extreme. Although she is rank 6 Dayan immortal, facing this team of nearly 100 Dayan immortals, she has no chance of winning at all, and she can't even escape. But Jian Wushuang seemed extremely calm, as if this team was not enough to be afraid. As for Jiang Lian's return to the 2 sword immortals, he even regarded them as a joke. In addition to having ascended to rank 9 Dayan immortal, they also became such terrifying existences as sword immortal. Even in the face of strong people in the same realm, they can easily be beheaded, let alone these Dayan immortals. Jian Wushuang, who didn't want to have trouble, didn't plan to fight, but was ready to leave. But almost at the same time, the black robe team suddenly shot. A chain of Yanli chains that seemed overwhelmingly powerful rushed out of their hands, and then all surrounded them. Xianjun Fuyao's complexion changed drastically, and his mood had fallen to the bottom, and he didn't even have the thought to resist. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes froze, and Yanli went straight into the sky. Facing the Yanli chain that was pressed by layers, he completely released his sword intent. Wushuang Kendo Zingaheijianyani, the first style. Millions of sword intent swept out, brazenly confronted. The two collided, and the incomparable sword intent completely burst at this moment. The sky changed, and the Dead Sea raised thousands of feet of dust. The chain of nearly 100 kinds of Yanli only persisted for a moment, and then it shattered. The purest streamer of power turned into endless fragments, scattered on the sea of endless. The chain released by nearly 100 Dayan immortals, from appearing to completely dissipating, did not even hold up for 10 breaths. This can no longer be described as horror. Xianjun Fuyao, who had seen this scene in full view, was already stunned on the spot, and was shocked to the point of no more. She never expected that this guy who was just a trivial immortal would send such a shocking thunder. Facing such an extremely violent aura, Xianjun Fuyao just felt unable to resist. A sword cut open the chain of Yanli, all Dayanxian took a step back, and then shot to resist the terrible sword intent. Jiang Li and Yan Fan also started at this moment. They shot at the same time, all 6 long swords at their waists resounded clearly. The 2 swords were cut out, the sky collapsed directly, the sea of boundlessness also sank and cracked, and billions of meters of dust was rolled up, making everything chaotic. Nearly 100 Dayan immortals all looked up at this scene, and then they were swallowed by endless chaos. The sky and the sea were connected together, and chaos swallowed everything. Under this chaos, even Jian Wushuang was heart palpitated. The sword intent of Jiang Lian's return to the 2 was so terrifying that the borderless sea couldn't bear their swordsmanship at all, and it became fragmented. The chaotic sky was completely torn apart, the sea area was cut out of a sky moat, and the sea frantically poured into it. This is the full-strength sword of the 2 Nineth-ranked Dayan immortals and the 2 sword immortals, making everything lose its color. The long sword was sheathed at the same time. Yan Fan shook his head. It's really a group of people who don't know how to live or die. Everything has settled, and no Dayan immortal can survive the full strength of the 2 sword immortals. But there are always exceptions. Just as the sword intent dissipated, a gloomy light took advantage of the chaos to escape. Want to go? Jian Wushuang raised his brows, and raised his palm and squeezed Yao Yao. The chaotic sky collapsed in an instant, and the figure of a black robe was captured and returned. It was a rank 6 Dayan immortal. No, don't let me go. At this moment, the rank 6 Dayan immortal was already in a state of dying. Under that sword, his immortal body had been completely shattered, and even Xianyuan might be shattered at any time. Why do you want to shoot us? Jian Wushuang said coldly. The only remaining rank 6 Dayan immortal said in horror, No, we just want to catch some single Dayan immortals, not against a few immortals at all. Jian Wushuang thought of something. As if he was thinking of something, he said in a deep voice, "What is the Dian immortal who caught the single?" Throwing them all into the city of exile, fighting each other, in order to accumulate luck for the emperor's emperor. Rank 6 Dian said in horror. He frowned when he heard that, and the bad premonition in his heart became stronger. Tell me where the city of exile is. Yu reading www.akanshu.com. Xianjun, I can tell you, but can you let me go? Can. The city of exile is located in the far north. You can reach it by walking straight ahead. As his last sentence fell, the fairy body was directly crushed into powder, and even Xian Yuan became nothingness. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm, his eyes did not fluctuate. The far north, the city of exile. Diqing, maybe it's there. Gudu. Xianjun Fu Yao swallowed his throat uncontrollably, looking at the three evil gods beside her. For the first time she felt a sense of powerlessness and fear in her heart. Now she is secretly grateful. Fortunately, no conflict has erupted before. Otherwise, with the performance of the three evil gods just now, her little heaven and land plane may not even have ashes left. Chapter 4980. The gray-black skeletal bones of Xian Xian have accumulated to an unimaginable level with each other, and it is no longer known how many years they have been soaked in the endless sea. They were once the overlords of the heavens, but they have already fallen miserably at this moment and have become the cornerstones of the heavens and the land. And above this heaven and land, a magnificent and treacherous giant city stands in it. Should I exchange it with the treasure, or leave the luck? In the deep corridors of the huge city made of some material, a small black-robed old man whispered. Standing in front of him was a thin Dian immortal. Leave luck. He whispered, then stretched out his palm, condensing a drop of fairly pure luck from his palm. The black-robed old man didn't say much. After reaching out his hand to remove the drop of luck, he let him enter the giant city. As the team continued to move forward, the black-robe old man tirelessly collected drops of luck. When a figure shrouded in a large black robe appeared, the originally dirty air was clear. The short black-robed old man raised his head and looked at the black-robed figure in front of him. By instinct, he felt that this was a very young figure. Should I exchange it with the treasure, or leave the luck? The black-robed figure didn't say much, and directly waved a drop of luck. The appearance of this drop of luck caused all the filth to begin to recede, and then fell in front of the black-robed old man. Seeing this drop of luck, the black-robed old man couldn't help but exclaimed, "It's really good, I haven't seen such pure luck for a long time." Leaving this drop of luck, the black-robed figure flashed into the giant city, and the three figures behind him also entered together. This is a huge city, and it is also a city of killing. Dozens and hundreds of Dian immortals were left here. They were fighting each other, just to leave alive in the end. The Dian immortal who delivered a drop of luck to enter here did not participate in the fight, and completely acted as a spectator to appreciate this tragic battle. In such a city of exile, all Dian immortals are already crazy. The Dian immortal, who had given his luck, acted as a spectator, sitting leisurely in the void, condescendingly watching the Dian immortals who had fallen into battle under the light curtain. Boom! The huge split wave slashed open, completely slicing a Dian immortal into pieces. A sturdy body with a dense body of scars, the three-turned Dian immortal, after beheading two of the Dian immortals in the initial stage, raised his arms in excitement. But he hadn't been excited for long before he was shattered from behind by a lean rank 6 Dian, and his body disappeared. Under this chaotic fight, these supreme Dian immortals have become the most humble existence. They fought wildly with each other, just to finally be able to leave alive. Dian immortal continued to die out, but then even Dian immortal came in again. This city of exile is completely a city of murder. After beheading many Dian immortals one after another, the lean rank 6 Dian immortal didn't scream, but left quietly like a ghost. He specializes in killing the lonely and declining Dian immortal, and he is often in no trouble. There are already more than 10 Dian immortals that have fallen in his hands. Then the thin and ghostly rank 6 Dayan Immortal saw a Dayan Immortal sitting in the corner with his eyes closed. This is a lonely and extremely weak Dayan Immortal. He seems to have suffered a very serious injury. The ground is still sprinkled with some colorful blood, and the extravagant clothes on his body are a little broken. Seeing this scene, the thin, ghostly rank 6 Dayan Immortal flashed greed in his eyes. He stepped forward slowly, and the fighting behind him seemed to have nothing to do with him. At this moment, there was only the mysterious Dayan in front of him. But when he was about to approach, the mysterious Dayan Xian quietly opened his eyes. Profound red gold. With unparalleled prestige. Just staring at each other, the skinny and ghostly rank 6 Dayan was desperate. He could clearly feel that it was an existence he couldn't compare. Rank 9 Dayan Immortal. The absolute existence of Dayan Immortal realm is simply impossible to contend. The difference between rank 9 Dayan Immortal and Monarch is that the Emperor controls the Emperor's luck, but they don't. Escape, this is the only idea in his mind, but there are always ideas that cannot be realized. The thin and ghostly rank 6 Dayan Immortal only felt that the immortal body could not move at all, and a deepest level of fear completely surrounded him. Then the Dayan Immortal sitting on the ground slowly got up. His heroic and pure face was covered with frost. A total of 9 magnificent colorful feathers surging between the tips of his hair, exuding a general trend that cannot be seen directly. Let it go, let me go, I have no intention of being an enemy of you. Rank 6 Dayan Immortal was terrified to the point where it could not be added, but this was only his last word. At this moment, huge and magnificent 10-party wings suddenly burst out from behind him, dispelling all filth and blood mist. The brilliant glow from his body illuminates the entire city of exile. All the Dayan Immortals who were fighting each other, and the Dayan Immortals who were sitting above the void, watching this scene from a condescending position, held their breath and looked at that figure. The filthy power retreated, and there was no trace of blood mist that could soak his fairy body. Facing the tens of hundreds of Dayan Immortals in front of him, there was no fear in his eyes, even a little disdain. Then he reached out and took something out of his arms. It is a D-pin pill. The last Emperor pin pill can restore him to his heyday in an instant. He stagnated for a moment, then sent Dan Maru into his mouth. The mighty and magnificent Huameng shot out with him as the center at this moment, shining the entire city of exile. From the ancient times to the present, has grown to an unimaginable point. This extremely filthy city of exile, let him destroy it. The wings of the 10 directions shook suddenly, and the feather curtain composed of countless pure golden feathers shot out, making all the Dayan Immortals in front of them irreversibly destroyed. There is a fragile body of the Dayan Immortal whose realm is the initial realm. They died on the spot, and even before they wailed, they disappeared without a trace. As for the fate of rank 3 Dayan Immortal cannot escape the destruction, only rank 6 Dayan Immortal barely dodges, looking at him with fright. Shifang's wings are moving in a regular rhythm, and with each rhythm, they can harvest the lives of several Dayan Immortals. At this moment, even the Dayan Immortals who were sitting in the void as spectators, all had cold hands and feet, as if they were on the scene, feeling the cold killing intent. The city of exile, which had been fighting wildly, was now one-sided. Under the strangulation of the Qi Jin Zhenyu, no Dayan Immortal could bear it. Chapter 4981. At this moment, all the Dayan Immortals who had been killed in the city of exile gave up fighting and fled in panic. This entire unimaginable giant city was shaken, and it began to become a little shaky. Rank 9 Dayan Immortal, here is the master. All Dayan Immortals dare not even stand up, they can only run wildly for their lives. But this city of exile has no outlet for them. They can only be killed or killed, and only those who survive in the end can leave. And right now, the most tragic one-sided killing is going on in this city of exile. For some Dayan Immortals in the initial realm, they couldn't even make a sound, they turned into a cloud of blood. Only at this moment, there were more than 20 dead Dayan Immortals. Everything is shrouded in chaos and horror. And the dying immortals who were sitting on the void, overlooking the city of exile, turned from initial panic to hysterical excitement. It is equivalent to being imprisoned on this plane of heaven and land. The dying immortals who have been for countless years can only be regarded as lingering alive. Their fairy is long gone, like a body that has not been pursued, and only a tragic battle can awaken their memories. Especially watching the continuous fall of dying immortals, they all became hysterical and excited. Kill, kill, kill. The scream that almost collapsed the huge city resounded. The wings of the 10 directions bloomed completely, and almost half of the city of exile was swallowed by an unimaginable general trend. His face was stern, as if he was above the realm of heaven, and he was punishing him. He is teaching the truth of the heyday. Under his wrath, the black Waboxiang, the white Waboxiang, the golden Waboxiang, and the 3 real-life treasures came out together, completely letting all the dying immortals who were killing them in despair. The black Wubao screamed wildly, and as soon as it spread its wings, it swallowed the digital dying immortal. The Baiwu Baoxiang cleared, and its huge treasure directly turned into countless white ons, confining all the escaped dying immortals in the domain. The golden crow and treasure shook, it waved its huge golden wings and lowered endless golden feathers. Under this veil, all the dying immortals on the run were burned. Nearly 40 dying immortals were reduced to ashes within a few dozen breaths. This was an unimaginable scene, so that the dying immortal who was thrown into the city of exile was slaughtered to death. Qijin Huameng hovered around Diqing, dispelling all filthy blood mist. He seemed to have walked out of the ancient times, with some unknown luck. When the city of exile was completely dead, there was only one figure standing right in the center. The Samwabeo phase disappeared, and Diqing returned to peace. In the city of exile, apart from him, there is no other dying immortal standing. All the dying immortals who participated in the killings seemed to have evaporated, and there was no trace at all. Diqing Ning stood there, looking at the dim light curtain above his head. He knew that the exit from here was above. Just when he was about to do it, the light curtain was suddenly opened, and then a powerful figure entered the city of exile. Nearly 100 physiques, nearly 100 dying immortals. Every dying immortal is actually at the lowest level of the third revolution. The moment they entered, they all locked the truth. The power that was terrifying enough to shatter the heavens was all released at this moment. Seeing dying immortal who kept moving closer, a wave of fluctuation flashed in Diqing's eyes. The Emperor Pin pills did restore him to his peak state, but this was not enough to keep him fighting. As an ancestral golden crow, he has given birth to 9 true lives up to now and is called the immortal golden crow. And every time the undead golden crow loses a true life, it has to enter a long slumber to stabilize the fairy source. But Diqing had lost 2 true lives, and he should have entered a long sleep to stabilize the source, but he did not sleep, which inadvertently hid hidden dangers. Once his 3rd true life is gone, his 9th rank will no longer be guaranteed, and he will fall into a long and endless sleep. In the face of these nearly 100 Tier 3 dying immortals, this 3rd true fate is bound to fall. But he is inevitable and can only challenge. The violent force broke out again, and the violent degree even made the entire city of exile shake more violently. It seemed that it might be broken at any time. This battle is even more terrifying than the first battle. All dying immortals who entered the exile city did not kill each other, but all rushed towards Diqing. Yanli is magnificent, covering everything. Above the city of exile, in the endless void, a black cloud that was so thick that it could not be melted was slowly burning, as if overlooking this scene. And behind this black cloud, more than a dozen figures dressed in large black robes stood quietly, surging with terrifying momentum. After a while, a deep and hoarse voice came from the black cloud. Forcing all his air luck out, I can feel the strongest air luck in his body that does not belong to him. A group of black robe figures promised, and then all turned into a cloud of smoke, disappearing. At the same time, the light curtain covering the city of exile was suddenly opened, and black robe figures entered quietly. Jin Wu Baoxiang was directly torn into pieces by the terrifying power of Yen. This combined with the full blow of nearly 100 Dayan immortals, it was too terrifying. While tearing apart the golden black treasure at the same time, he repelled the truth. The extravagant clothes shattered, and the blood of God gushed from the wound. Nearly 100 Dayan immortals were all pressed at this moment, and a chain of powerful Yanli chains fell through the world and tied them to Di Qing's body. Di Qing exerted his strength and shattered the Yanli chains around his body, but then more chains fell, which firmly bound his limbs. In the next moment, nearly 20 ghostly black-robed figures appeared quietly, and the first black-robed figure came directly to Di Qing's body. He held up a sharp cone that was covered with dense patterns of light and slammed it into Di Qing's chest. In an instant, S power was dissipated, the 9th rank completely disappeared, and his pupils dimmed instantly. Hand over the luck contained in your fairy body, I will let you leave here. Release the sharp cone, the black-robed figure said. True fate was declining, and Di Qing was already angered, but his expression was still calm, and his bleak eyes were still disdainful. The next moment, the entire exiled giant city suddenly experienced a huge earthquake without any warning. Then, there was an endless majestic Tianhe, which suddenly tore the void, as if the mountains and seas were pouring down, covering them down. Tianhe is endless, concealing all development forces. The stars and the moon are all in it. All Dayan immortals turned their heads in horror at this moment, and then fled frantically. Having closed his eyes, Di Qing suddenly opened his eyes, and an incredible light appeared in his pupils. Chapter 4982. He felt an extremely familiar breath. That kind of breath is Jian Wushuang. The Tianhe is lofty and the trend is endless. The sword Tianhe, composed of billions of sword intents, approached and swallowed dozens of Dayan immortals almost instantly. Cracks began to appear in the walls of the entire city of exile. Seeing that the Kendo Tianhe cover with mountains and seas came under pressure, Di Qing laughed loudly, and then safely closed his eyes. Damn! The black robe was unable to resist the sword intent, and hurriedly fled. Rumble! Everything is gone. This martyrdom, which almost covered the entire territory, lasted for a long time, and the swordsmanship river was completely dissipated until everything was gone. Under this sword, there were more than 20 Dayan immortals who couldn't evade and disappeared. The rest of Dayan immortals who avoided all hid in the corner with horrified eyes and looked around. The ground was plowed and everything turned into scorched earth. Feeling the long river of sword intent dissipating all over, Zai Qing slowly opened his eyes, and then his pupils shrank. In front of him stood a figure, completely wrapped in a black robe, flowing with infinite sword intent. Then this figure stretched out his hand and slowly opened the pitch-black hood, revealing a beautiful and long-lost face. No Wushuang. Di Qing's emotions at this moment were already beyond the point of being overwhelmed. He had never expected to see old friends in this sea of no edge. And Jian Wushuang showed a relieved smile at this moment, and then said, I finally found you. Di Qing did not speak. He felt a different emotion rise in his heart. This emotion has never appeared before. In the end, he said, you shouldn't enter the borderless sea. It is too dangerous here. Danger is coming, but you are still here. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and the sword in his hand directly smashed all Yanli chains. Then, Jian Wushuang swiftly stepped forward and squeezed several D-pin pills into Di Qing's mouth. The entrance of Emperor Pin pills directly saved his true life that was about to fall. Thank you, Di Qing said solemnly. Don't say thank you, now the top priority is to leave here. Jian Wushuang said, then turned and looked behind him. Nearly 20 ghostly figures in black robes have arrived, and at the same time they have been surrounded by Dayan Immortal in all directions. Wushuang, you go first, I will block them. The truth that recovered from the weakness has returned to the previous coldness, and the invisible general trend has quietly spread. Jian Wushuang heard the words and smiled. None of us need to move, they can't hurt one of our fingers. Di Qing was startled, and some did not understand the meaning of his words. Although Jian Wushuang was extremely strong, he was still incapable of facing these hundreds of Dayan immortals. "Leave it all," the black-robed figure said, and with a wave of his hand, dozens of Dayan immortals rushed forward eagerly. Facing the overwhelming Dayan immortal, Jian Wushuang stood in front of Di Qing, did not even take a step back, and calmly looked forward. It was as if he was waiting for something, until a strange wave of ripples appeared in the void. 3 large black robes appeared quietly, standing in front of Jian Wushuang. The first thin black robe directly raised his hand a little. In an instant, like mountains and seas, endless energy poured out from his fingertips. Under this special fluctuation, the space was directly torn apart, and even the dozens of Dayan immortals who were about to rush forward were turned into ashes. Di Qing's eyes suddenly opened to their maximum. 1 finger kills dozens of places, the lowest is rank 3 Dayan immortal, and it is so easy to write, how is this possible? When he was even more shocked, the endless energy released by that black-robed figure was sword intent. Destroy the enemy with 1 finger, and defeat the army. There are only less than 30 Dayan immortals left. How can I see these battles? After surviving, they didn't even have any fighting mood. They all fled in a frantic crawl. The figure of the black robe standing in front of Jian Wushuang didn't seem to have any intention of killing these Dayan immortals. He turned to look at Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. "This is the friend you've been looking for?" Jian Wushuang smiled and nodded, "Yes." After being stared at by that Qing Rin's pure gaze for a moment, Di Qing felt that the blood surging in the fairy body had begun to feel a little cold. He had only felt this feeling in Yu Chang, who was beside Zhen Weiyang. Yen Fan under the black robe heard the words and smiled slightly. "Yes, the Nineth rank Dayan immortal. Judging from the performance just now, he is a powerful character." Di Qing was taken aback, and he could see clearly the realm he had deliberately hidden with just a glance, which was enough to show that the black robe's figure was unfathomable. "Don't be stunned, leave quickly, lest accidents happen," Jiang Li reminded in a low voice. Yen Hui nodded, and then released the sword intent barrier to cover them all, before leaving here. Immediately afterwards, another black-robed figure squeezed Jian Wushuang away, knowing whether it was intentional or unintentional, and came to Di Qing's side. Di Qing was very puzzled, and he was shocked until the black-robed figure pulled off his hood. Why are you?" Xianjun Fuyao turned red when he heard the words, and then said, Why, it can't be me. I won't appreciate it if I came to save you. I would have known that I would not come." He quickly looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang shrugged, with a subtle smile in his eyes. Di Qing was helpless. For this enthusiasm, Xianjun Fuyao, who had to blend his ancestral veins the first time he met, he held an attitude of keeping away from him. As soon as the injury healed, he quickly left. Never thought that they would meet again here. "Many, thank you." Di Qing grinned reluctantly, with a somewhat unnatural expression. Fairy Fuyao immediately smiled upon hearing the words, "If you know your interest, this girl will take you away." She said that she hugged Di Qing's arm and was about to leave together. The only exit of this magnificent city of exile is above the head, and you can only leave by tearing open the light curtain barrier. All the surviving Dayan immortals gathered at this moment and soared towards the exit. Jian Wushuang and the others wanted to leave here as soon as possible. But the next moment, the light curtain barrier that was torn by Jian Wushuang's sword suddenly closed. With the closing of the light curtain enchantment, countless strands of dark blue huameng resemble a spider web, radiating on the light curtain enchantment, gradually forming a large array. As the 4 eyes of this big formation settled, a kind of suction like a tarsal maggot descended and enveloped the entire city of exile. The first thing that felt the change was Dian Xian, who was closest to the exit. Almost in an instant, their fairy bodies began to wither and age, and strands of pure white light also rose from their bodies. Chapter 4983. Accompanied by that pure white light lifted into the air, all were swallowed and absorbed by that tricky formation. All Dayan immortals couldn't even make a sound, and within a few dozen breaths, they withered and aged to the extreme. Their flesh and blood peeled off, and even the charm that the fairy bones quickly lost turned into flying ash. In just a few dozen breaths of time, they were completely gone. Jian Wushuang and others all retreated quickly, looking at the big formation vigilantly. The entire city of exile was surrounded by a large formation, and after absorbing the luck of dozens of Dayan immortals, it became more and more terrifying. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang felt the qi luck in Xian's body began to flow slowly. This big formation, can you even take your breath? Yan Fan frowned. It seems that the master of Feng Tianlu is not simple. It's not easy to be called by Yan Fan, then the master behind Tianlu is definitely more than the 9th-ranked Dayan immortal. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn, and he was ready to give his all. At this moment, Yan Fan and Jiangli looked at each other and then walked forward. With each step they took, the void shook. Facing the huge treacherous formation above their heads, they simultaneously held down the hilt of their waists and then cut out a sword in an instant. The speed of this sword was so fast that even Jian Wushuang didn't see it clearly, so he cut it out. The void shattered in an instant, and the infinite sword intent was like a blooming fairy flower, and each path reflected an unparalleled trend. Hundreds of millions of genii brazenly slammed into the fairy formation, bursting out incomparable huang. Di Qing was completely shocked by this sword, and hurriedly released Yanli to protect Jian Wushuang and Fuyao Xianjun. The two collided, and the general situation caused the entire city of exile to begin to shatter. The city wall turned into dust and eventually shattered. Even the one who was shattered together was the treacherous array above his head. When the infinite sword intent completely dissipated, everything settled down. The huge and magnificent city of exile has been shattered, leaving only some ruins, and even the void has been cut to pieces. Go! Yan Fan whispered, and immediately released Yanli's momentum to protect Jian Wushuang and the others. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and immediately swept up together, ready to leave. And at this moment, the original broken void was suddenly shrouded in black clouds, and the retreat in all directions was blocked. The 5 of them were trapped in the most central position. It's coming out with its head and tail exposed. Yan Fan's eyes were rare and solemn, and her palms were attached to the hilt of the sword around her waist, ready to draw her sword at any time. Jiangli was also at this moment, blocking Jian Wushuang without a trace. At this point, the entire city of exile was destroyed, more than half of the sky and land, and everything was shrouded in chaos. Along with the chaos, a thick and treacherous black cloud came to them. It's a good sword intent. You are one of the few guys who can break my formation so easily. An old, hoarse and low voice resounded from the black cloud, and then the volatile black cloud began to change. It continued to transform, gradually transforming into a tall figure, and that fuzzy face finally turned into the appearance of Yan Fan. I appreciate you guys very much. Yan Fan's eyes condensed, and then he said with disdain, he's another guy who pretends to be a fool. He Yun, who was exactly the same body and face as Yan Fan, grinned and grinned. No, I don't like pretending to be gods and ghosts. What I show is the strength I can't control. Furthermore, a sword fairy like you, I have also personally killed it. Only you want to kill this sword immortal? Yan Fan was even more disdainful. I have never seen anyone who can kill me. Heiyun laughed softly. Everyone who can become a sword fairy is unprecedentedly strong, and the power and air luck in the fairy body are more pure, so I like to absorb the air luck of the sword fairy, which is of great help to me. Just relying on you, you want to swallow this sword immortal's luck, so you are not afraid of my head being chopped off? Yan Fan said in a deep voice. He returned to calm. You can't kill me, even if I don't do it, you are not enough to kill me. Yan Fan's eyes became cold. Why want to try? Of course I want to try it. Countless years have passed since the last time I killed the sword immortal. Now I want to try it again. Heiyun slowly raised his arms, his deep eyes filled with excitement. Use your strongest sword. If I am satisfied, maybe I can let you make a living. Yen Fan laughed when he heard the words. His eyes suddenly changed cold at this moment. Old things, you know, there is no Dayan immortal worthy of my strongest sword, including you. I like your arrogance. If you are not my food, I would love you to be my friend. After Heiyun finished speaking these last words, he stepped forward. In an instant, the shattered void was swallowed by the chaos, and then wisps of black clouds overflowed from the chaos and surrounded him. At this moment, the terrifying and treacherous black cloud turned into a robe with black gold patterns all over his body. When this black gold robe appeared, the originally chaotic sky began to enter a state of surrender. Therefore, the dissipated masterless power also surrendered. A treacherous order of heaven was constructed in this chaos. At this moment, whether it was Jian Wushuang, Jiang Lian, and Diqing Fuyao Xianjun, when they saw the black cloud in the black gold robe, their complexion changed drastically. That is the emperor's clothes representing the emperor's luck. And those who can wear the clothes of God have mastered the emperor's luck. Emperor Qi luck, just 4 short words, is too terrifying, so terrible that even the Dayan immortal, who can create heaven with a wave of his hand, can't compete with Emperor Qi luck. The emperor's luck, represents absolute control. Under the thought of the Emperor Dangxian's fairy sources are all things to play with. Jian Wushuang, who had been in contact with 6 emperors, knew more clearly what the emperor's luck represents. Even if there was only a ray of remnant soul left in the heavenly court of the past, Emperor Six Crows was enough to kill Diqing, who was the 9-ranked Dayan immortal. The 3 emperors in the Boyang bottle belonged to a different situation. Their emperor body and emperor gas luck disappeared, leaving only 3 weak true souls. But even if the true souls of the 3 emperors were extremely weak, as long as they reshaped the emperor body in the years to come, they would be able to return to their peak state. Once the emperor's luck was in control, Dayan had already transcended the shackles of the realm and reached a mysterious state. The emperor's luck represents absolute control, and no Dayan immortal can cause trauma to the emperor. This also means that when the black cloud reveals the emperor's luck, everything has become a foregone conclusion. At this moment, Yen Fan's eyes changed, as if he had already made a decision in his heart. Chapter 4984. Looking at the dark clouds that had already been added to the emperor's clothing, Yen Fan then calmly called Jiang Li's name. Jiang Li, I'm here. Leave them with me, I will stay. Jiang Li's figure trembled slightly, and then whispered, I'll stay. You can't stay, the 2 of us must leave one. Yen Fan said, his eyes firm and beyond doubt. How could Jiang Li not understand what he was thinking after being a swordsman for countless years? And it was precisely because of this that she was so at a loss. Leaving, where can we leave? She murmured. Yen Fan smiled when he heard the words. Remember, you can go as far as you can. Whether or not, hand over master's kendo to Wushuang, this is your task. Jiang Li was already speechless, as if he was getting old in an instant. He stopped speaking, looked over Jiang Li, looked at Jian Wushuang, and then said with a smile, Let's go. Thousands of strands of pure sword intent surged from Yen Fan's fingertips, turned into a long wind to hold them up, and sent them out of the chaotic sky. After Jian Yi shattered the chaotic sky, until disappeared, he took a breath and looked at the black cloud. Already dressed in the emperor's clothes, the black cloud that builds the avenue of the emperor, looking at Yen Fan with interest, You are the guy I am most interested in this chaos. Do you know what you are about to face? Yen Fan smiled, his eyes were cold. You can hide from others, but you can't hide from my eyes. Even if you have mastered the emperor's luck, you will not become an emperor. If I guess it is right, your emperor's luck they were all obtained by devouring the luck of other Dayan immortals. Haiyin's face was faintly cold, and then returned to calm. So what? When I leave here, I will become a real Emperor Dedeo, who can stop me? The future is the future. Do you really think you can leave here? Yen Fan smiled coldly, and then lightly drew the hilt of the sword with his palm, and an unparalleled cold light burst out. Do you really think this can trap me? Heiyun opened his arms and laughed. I only need to swallow your luck, and then the luck of those guys, then it will be time for me to break through here. Yen Fan's face trembled slightly, and he felt bad. Heiyun smiled. You don't really think they can leave here, right? I just let them go temporarily, kill you first, and then find them. Only you can kill me? He said coldly, and then a long sword full of silver stripes and 4 rays of cold light was pulled out. As soon as the long sword came out, the chaotic breath dared not approach. At this moment, Yen Fan, with an incomparable Xuanhe sword intent surging all over his body, there was a faint and chaotic atmosphere that seemed to resist. Even if the opposite of him is the dark cloud with the Emperor's luck, he never had the slightest intention to retreat. I want to kill you only in one thought, but now I want to know how strong you are. If I am satisfied, I might use your fairy body. Heiyun gave a weird smile, and then his arms suddenly rose, and the infinite chaotic aura escaped from his fairy body, and behind it condensed into a grand throne. Chaos is enough to overwhelm everything. But at this moment, Yen Fan was calm to the extreme, and her long black hair broke through the band and flew in the air like a broken ancient sword fairy. He held the hilt in one hand, and the snowflake blade pointed straight forward. Facing the black cloud with the Emperor's luck, a cold and solitary breath burst out from Yen Hu's body. Infinite sword intent, like mountains and seas will pour, brazenly facing each other. The land and the sky are broken, and the sea of no edge has rolled up the dust. At this moment, everything is completely chaotic. At the same time, Jiang Li, who was running through the void, stopped and stared blankly at the boundless void, as if something had gone away from him. Jian Wushuang also stopped, and he also felt the palpitating tremor. Di Qing and Fu Yao Xianjin's complexion also dimmed. They all knew what it meant to control the Emperor's luck. Yen returned to stay, even if he was terrible to the extreme, but waiting for him, there could only be one way. Even if he knew, he still stayed and died generously. At the next moment, Jian Wushuang turned around and resolutely rushed to the location of broken heaven and land. Di Qing followed him without hesitation at the moment he made a decision. But Jiang Li then appeared in front of Jian Wushuang, blocking his way. You can't go. Jian Wushuang said in a condensed voice, I can't, I just watched him stay, even if we leave together. If he doesn't stay, none of us can do without. Jiang Li said while looking at him. After a moment of contemplation, he said again, I will go back, don't worry. After saying this sentence, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate to leave. But Jiang Li suddenly stopped him at this moment. You can't save him. If you go, it's like sending him to death. Jian Wushuang stopped at the same place and said nothing. Don't be sent to death. If you go, he will die too worthless. Jiang Li said softly, his voice calm, as if he was telling something that had nothing to do with her. Remember, there is no happy land here or even in the heavens, and each has its own suffering. After speaking these last words, Jiang Li stretched out his hand to release a sword intent and bound Jian Wushuang so that he could no longer make the next move. The world is empty, everything is bleak. Jian Wushuang also gave up resistance. Perhaps as Jiang Li said, each has its own suffering. But an immortal uses his suffering to perfect a person who wants to be perfect, and it is always a bit tragic. Tianlu has been completely broken, sinking into the boundless sea. Everything has been swallowed by the chaos. But in this chaotic atmosphere, there is still a figure that is not tainted by chaos. Xuanhe's sword intent is still flowing all over him facing the black cloud. He never takes a step back. The black cloud standing in the void looked at him with a smile but a smile. Use your strongest sword, let me see how strong you are, and I will consider whether to swallow your fairy body. Yen Fan's expression remained arrogant. I said before that no one can see my sword, not even you. It's so ridiculous, you know, I can kill you with a single finger, and it's forever. Heiyun said coldly. Really? He sneered. If you could kill me with one finger, I'm afraid you would have done it long ago. Oh, don't you believe it? I don't believe it, but I know you can't. Yen Fan laughed, with 6 long swords on his waist. At this moment, Qi Qingming exploded with unparalleled momentum. Haiyun's complexion was completely gloomy, and the whole body was chaotic, rushing out. Chapter 4985. The huge throne behind him is even more magnificent and overwhelming. Since you want to seek death, then I will fulfill you. Heiyun whispered, and the endless chaos aura surged from his mouth, rushing towards Yen Fan in fear. Yen Fan, who had been hit hard in the previous confrontation, did not back down in the face of the endless chaos. He raised his sword and confronted forward resolutely. At this moment, the sky reflects the magnificent sword curtain. Each space revealed a pure and mighty sword intent. When the two collided, the most terrifying aura of destruction erupted. Under this aura, even rank 6 Dayan Immortal would never survive. At this moment, Yen Fan backed away thousands of feet. A trace of divine blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth and immediately disappeared completely. His powerful sword was enough to kill Wan Yangxian's army, and even easily crushed the Nineth rank Dianxian of the same realm without even raising his head. But now, he was facing the dark cloud that had already controlled the Emperor's luck. Everything was different. The sky-covering sword curtain was easily torn apart, and the chaotic aura swallowed and wiped everything frantically. Facing the chaotic aura from Guy, Yen Fan drew out his second long sword. It was a weird long sword with a blade on one side. It was more appropriate than a straight sword rather than a long sword. At the moment this weird sword appeared, his breath completely changed, his sharpness was reduced, as if he had fallen asleep. As soon as the chaotic atmosphere came, Yen Fan suddenly opened his eyes, exuding a horrifying gesture. At the next moment, he raised the sword in his hand and cut it straight down. Just like the beginning of the heavens and the earth, the turbid air sank and the clear air rose, opening an unimaginable crack. Under this rift, even this terrifying chaotic atmosphere had to be cut away. Yen Fan yelled in a low voice, and the palm of his hand holding the sword hilt was already under this tremendous force, and the blood was dripping with blood. The robes of his upper body shattered directly at this moment, revealing a solid chest. Then the blood overflowed from every pore on his fairy body, spilling into the void. Facing the chaotic aura with CC Emperor's luck, everything seemed unstoppable. But Yen Fan never backed away, just shook the long sword in his hands, cutting away the chaotic atmosphere. Accompanied by his anger, the sword's strength was open to the sky. It turned out to be abruptly cutting away the breath. The infinite sword intent rushed, and the chaotic aura that split into 2 pieces also dissipated. Heiyun's strange and inexplicable face appeared, and he looked at Yen Fan with a smile, seemingly satisfied. With her chest rising and falling violently, Yen Fan wiped away the blood from the corner of her mouth and looked at him solemnly. Yes, you are several times stronger than the sword fairy that I erased a long time ago. You can break my breath with your own power. I start to hope you will be stronger. Only if you become stronger, can you arouse me. Heiyun's arms slowly raised, and the chaotic emperor's seat behind him, which could cover all the heavens, directly soared. It broke through the void, carrying an aura of endless chaos, and went straight to Yen Fan. Heaven and earth became distorted under this chaotic emperor's seat, and a treacherous way of heaven quietly swallowed everything. There was a bit of bitterness at the corner of Yen Fan's mouth, but he was still aloof and cold, like a long sword with a hidden front waiting to be opened. Facing this chaotic emperor, the sword came from his waist. 6 long swords and 6 infinite sword intents clung to Yen Fan's body. They hovered quietly behind him, their respective sword intents turned into a touch of Changhong and condensed an invisible sword in Yen Fan's hands. The colorful sword body also reflects the general trend of overwhelming heaven. Yen Fan's eyes were indifferent, even if he was facing a chaotic emperor with the emperor's luck, he dismissed it. In the next moment, he directly led the sword, and the 6 sword intent turned into a Changhong to penetrate the world. Under this sword, the treacherous heavenly Tao constructed by the black cloud was torn apart, and even the chaotic aura that escaped outside was strangled. This is the sword of Jinghong and the final sword. Under this absolute sword, there is a kendo that has been silent for many years. This is the anger of the sword immortal, with the decisive spirit of burning jade and stone. Seeing this sword, even Heiyun couldn't hide his surprise, but immediately became more greedy. He was almost certain that if he could use Yen Fan's fairy body for his own use, he would be enough to tear the borderless sea and escape successfully. The Emperor Huangwang's seat came down, letting all the powers surrender. The Sword Immortal's Haosheng sword collided with it. This is a battle beyond the realm of rank 9 Dian Immortal. Even rank 9 Dian Immortal can't even imagine how terrifying this battle will be. This is the peak battle between the strongest Sword Immortal and the 9th rank Dian Immortal who controls the Emperor's luck. If this is not the borderless sea, then just relying on this terrifying aura can easily tear any heaven and immortal territory. Under this battle, the way of heaven is like a child's play, and the majestic brilliance can't even be stopped by the 9th rank Dian. The Sword Immortal's sword collided with the Chaos Emperor's seat, and there was no terrible loud noise erupted at all, and no sound was even made. But the void collapsed into a black hole, and became an eternal nothingness. In this nothingness, even the power of growth cannot escape. The void has become a vacuum zone of eternal nothingness, everything has lost its color, and the void is extinguished and collapsed in large areas. The chaotic Emperor's seat, which included the Emperor's luck, was stopped at this moment, and there was no further. And what prevented it was a sword fairy with a colorful halo. At this moment, Yen Fan was covered with blood, but his fairy body was not damaged or even distorted. He actually withstood the Emperor's luck. It is impossible to imagine that with the power of the Nineth rank Great Immortal, it is impossible to resist the impact of the Emperor's luck. But now it actually happened. Even though Yen Fan was already the end of the crossbow, Heiyun laughed wildly at this moment, with greed in his eyes. He directly waved his arms, and the Chaos Emperor's seat that was originally held by Yen Fan's sword sank. The Emperor's luck was even worse. The exhausted Yen Fan could no longer resist and was swallowed by the chaotic Emperor. Everything belongs to the eternal nothingness. Only under the nothingness, there remains chaos. As the source of the chaos, the black cloud that controls the Emperor's luck has quietly gone forward. He waved away the chaos and looked at Yen Fan lying in the eternal void. Only ecstasy and greed were left in his eyes. Give me your immortal body. Only under my guidance can he break through that shackle. Yen Fan, whose fairy body was broken to the extreme, couldn't even move his fingers, and could only lie quietly in nothingness. The last ray of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.